I would like to start the Board of Education meeting on May 11th, 2022, and it is 7:01. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our second item is approval of agenda, and I would like to just recommend a couple of changes. I wanted to move some of the items up. The purpose of the move is to take some of our standard work that we do as a board, our approval of minutes, our next board meeting, our communications, to put those at the bottom of the meeting. So I wanted to take the committee reports and move that up to right after item number 8. So that would become item number 9. And then I would like to take the superintendent's report and move that up right after the committee report. So that would make that one 10. And that would move our minutes and all the other stuff at the end.
Minutes to 11.
Minutes would be 11, the next board meeting would be 12, and communication would be 13, then we have public comment.
And we can eliminate 4 because I had told them not to come. I'm sorry that that's on here.
Okay, so definitely number 4?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I guess we're gonna.
Because we were doing the budget, I had asked them not to come, but I forgot to update that. I apologize.
Okay, so we're gonna eliminate item number 4, our high school reporters, because they are not presenting tonight. So those would be the changes that I would recommend. So if that's okay with everyone, we need a motion to accept the agenda with the changes.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Missy, seconded by Lindsay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. Item number 3 is our recognition of the students who have received the Superintendent Leadership Award. We have Eliana Castilla and Becky Watson. I'll give that to you.
Yes, thank you. Some people don't think being a superintendent is much fun, and it does have its moments, but this is a fun moment. Actually, most of the moments are fun. Tonight, I have the honor of recognizing 2 individuals from our high school who have been honored recently with a Superintendent's Leadership Award through the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, also known as CAPS. They were also recognized at what I understand was a very nice luncheon event. I didn't get to attend because it was when I had COVID and I was quarantined. So I'm sorry I missed it, but I heard it was a good event. And I'd like to say a few words about both of our recipients and maybe ask them to come forward. So the first one I'd like to recognize is Eliana Castiglia. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Eliana is a remarkable young woman of the utmost character. She's determined, conscientious, passionate, and caring. Ellie has taken a very rigorous course load consisting of honors, UConn, and advanced placement classes. She's a member of both the National Honor Society and Spanish Honor Society. She's also a recipient of the Yale Book Award. Ellie's been an integral part of the music program. She's a member of the chamber choir, show choir, and concert band, and has participated in the school musicals. She's a talented dancer who has studied tap, jazz, lyrical, and ballet. Her experiences in the performing arts have influenced her decision to pursue musical theater in college. Ellie is also a member of Model UN and EDGE. As a member of EDGE, she is dedicated to helping students and educating them about the dangers of substance abuse and vaping. So, would everyone please join me in congratulating Eliana?
Mom, do you want a picture? Go ahead, Doug, take a picture.
No, she's like, no, I don't need a picture.
It is. Come on.
Yeah.
This is memories.
It's not a picture. It's a model.
Okay.
Ellie, where are you going to school next year?
Oh, so funny story. I actually am going to UConn, and I've changed my major. So I'm actually going for biology studies.
Yes, biology people
with a
unite.
human rights minor.
Congratulations.
Well, I apologize for not being up to date on your
No,
child's
no, it's
information.
fine. It was like a spur of the moment thing. Feels good, feels right. Thank you.
Eliana, one of our Cog graduates from way back in 86, 87, Rebecca, her name's Lana Gordon, and
87.
she has done quite well in the theatrical world. You might research her, and maybe you can hook up to her with being a fellow CRHS graduate.
She'd love to. She's amazing. She
Thank
really
you.
is.
She's
And it took her a
traveling the
long
world.
time to hit her spot. You know, she's someone that in the last 10 years or so, she starred on Broadway in Chicago, and one of the, you know, so just someone that you might want to look
Yeah.
into. She'd love to talk to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, next I'd like to recognize Mackay Watson and ask him to come forward, please. Mackay was chosen for the Superintendent's Award because of his strong academic performance, impeccable character, and commitment to raising awareness for diversity, equity, and inclusion for all learners. Mackay has been involved in many activities at our school, including soccer, basketball, Best Buds, Unified Sports, Student Council, National Honor Society, and Spanish Honor Society. What sets Mackay apart from his peers is the dedication he has shown through his work with our special needs population and his willingness to participate in not only the school-wide events and clubs that we have, but also many programs and opportunities at the state and national level. Mackay has been a CARE ambassador, CIAC Youth Ambassador, Special Olympics Youth Leadership Delegate, and a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Representative for the CIAC. Mackay was also selected to participate in the USA Special Olympic Games in Florida this June. So please join me in congratulating Mackay.
Mackay, what do you do for
I agree
fun?
with you.
Is he a senior? Yeah. Congratulations. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Congratulations, great job. Item number 5, because those are the numbers we have on here, is a recognition of our National Honor Society inductees. And we wanted to publicly honor our inductees. Unfortunately, the night that they were inducted into the National Honor Society, the board had a special meeting, so none of us were able to attend. And also, some of the administrators were also not able to attend because of that meeting. So we wanted to make sure that those students knew that we recognized their accomplishment. I originally was going to ask them to come here in person, but I believe a number of them are involved in other activities tonight, so they wouldn't be able to attend. So, what we decided to do, which I shared with the board, is that each one of them is going to be receiving a personal congratulatory note from the board to recognize their accomplishments. And tonight, what I would like to do is to have Lindsay read their names publicly.
You can do it. Now, I don't know if any of them are in the room, but if you are, stand
yes.
up, that would be awesome. Tyler Fusco, Jack Husher, Leah Wagner, Sam Whittle, Dalton Bates, Jenna DePonte, Charlotte Dunleavy, Catherine Farr, Serena Fournier, Hayden Gonzalez, Kaya Kolpick, Alexandra Nick, Hannah Nielsen, Jason Penny, Mia Paternicki, Adam Schaefer, Chloe Schaefer, Allison Strang, Julia Talbert-Slagle, Catherine Taylor, Connor Ullman, Christine Waterman, and Hope Wondolowski.
Next item on the agenda is public comment, which would involve the items that are on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay. Hearing none.
I'll speak.
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
really surprised no one else wanted to speak.
There's one at the end
You're
too, Josh.
I know, but this one is more important.
Always afraid to get up and somebody else.
So I'll be quick.
So state your name, please.
Yeah, thank you. Josh Ettinger, Durham, Connecticut. Listening to your meeting last night, I did want to come and say a few words before you guys discuss the budget. So I actually thought I was going to have a few minutes to compose myself before I did this, but I wanted to talk about two things. One, goal setting, and then two, how we engage stakeholders, or you engage stakeholders. Here's how I see things, basically. A budget is a set of priorities. If you don't apply money to a priority, it's not really a priority. It's just a wishful thinking. It is also important to try and make small incremental improvements to the school every year. And because those small incremental improvements compound over time. And so if you're constantly making small improvements, you get a much larger impact when those students are, going out into the world. And then lastly, if your goal is simply to keep the status quo, you're losing, because the world is moving forward. And if you're not advancing our academics and citizenship and all of those qualities that we want to see in our students and that they need to be successful in the world, if your goal is just to keep what we did last year the same, then I think you've already lost. And so I'm hoping that you'll keep these things in mind as you're sort of looking at what needs to be cut from the budget. Because if you're not setting aside a little something to help make the school better, then I don't know what we're doing. Now, as far as the engagement, unfortunately, you're sort of stuck tonight with me as a public commenter and whatever else you've been able to gather, over the last couple weeks or even from yesterday to today. But anecdotally, right, I don't think I'm the only person that thinks there's value in extracurriculars and particularly the field house. I don't know yet if I'm one of the voices that you already know about, as was said yesterday. I think that's, when I looked at the prior budget, which I did support, I saw the two goals that you were setting were plan for the reimagined education, to keep staff available so they can work on that, and to set aside a modest amount of money for the athletic program. And those appeared to be your goals. Now, what the goals will be after tonight, I'm not sure. That's what I'm waiting to see. But I'm hoping that you're not going to say, my goal is to keep things the same as they were last year. And lastly, because I didn't really round out, your stakeholders are not just your voters, or at least not just your most vocal voters who come here or comment on social media that you need to cut. Your stakeholders are the students, the parents of those students who didn't come to vote. And I can't quite figure out why they didn't or how you engage them better. And really, you're not going to get an opportunity to do that, at least for their input, but hopefully you can get their engagement to actually vote this time around. Because it's embarrassing, I think, that we can only get 900 voters, or I wrote it down, I guess we got 982 votes cast, 12% of our town. You have 1,440 learners in the district. We can't get parents of learners to come and vote for our budget. I mean, we're not engaging them in the way that we need to. And I don't know how to change that. So I apologize that I'm not bringing you solutions, I'm only bringing you problems. But I'm hoping that that is something you can work on to get those learners' parents to engage in the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak?
Sorry, I too thought there was going to be a line, so I was holding back. I'm actually reading this on behalf of a parent that's in the jazz band concert. So I'm Eileen Buckeye, but this is from Lori Fusco. Good afternoon. We are writing to voice our opinion regarding the failed budget referendum. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend in person tonight due to a conflict with the district jazz event scheduled at the same time. Number one, the repaving repair work to Pickett Lane should be bonded. Number two, if the public is in support of a field house, then it should be fully funded and bonded. Number three, I have heard from many voices from the students and others at the high school, and the consensus is the SRO is unnecessary. In light of the fact that Durham will now have a full-time evening trooper on duty, some of the personnel gaps that were present at the time of the hiring of the SRO are no longer an issue. A survey of faculty and staff at the high school should be conducted to see what it's felt is necessary. Number four, instructional coaches in the district, but especially at the middle school level, should be reconsidered and looked into as to their necessity. Perhaps a survey of each department in each school can highlight those unnecessary or duplicative positions. Number five, the position of the K-12 STEM coordinator should also be considered as a cut. This position has offered little to nothing at the high school level and should be considered moved to a stipend position. Again, surveying the relevant department would yield this inefficiency. Thank you. Mike and Lori Fusco.
Thank you.
Hello, Mariah Durham. I would like to echo, I completely agree what Josh, I believe his name was, said as well. I felt that it was kind of dismissive when I was listening to the meeting last night, saying that only a few people get up and repeatedly say things that maybe they don't agree with, such as the field house. But I think there's only certain people that come to these meetings because we're not engaging the community, as Josh had mentioned as well. We're not engaging them enough, we're not reaching out enough. And that's something that we really have to commit to doing. I don't think we should be prioritizing a field house over staff. I think if the field house is something that the community wants, then we should take that to bond. Additionally, I wanted to touch on EDI a little bit. We have the opportunity to continue the discussion about race, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our community. And I think it would be in the community's best interest if there were line items associated with the budget to account for the EDI initiatives needed for staff, administrators, and learners, for presentations and open table discussions for learners to continue conversations. The next time we have someone like Calvin Terrell come to address our community shouldn't be reactionary to more heinous acts that we hear about from learners. We need to be proactive. There should be an ongoing agenda item for every Board of Education meeting where either the Wellbeing Committee or the Durham Middlefield Racial Justice Team inform the board of how many incidents of racism and bullying have gone on in the school since the last meeting, with a couple examples of each. And we should all work hard as a community to see the day where we have no incidents of racism or bullying reported at one of the Board of Ed meetings. I strongly feel that in this way, if the board is continuing to hear about the incidents at meeting after meeting, they'll be forced to take action, which is what we should have already been doing in the first place, instead of holding special meetings in an attempt to stop the discussion and halt the administration's efforts to take action. And lastly, I'd like to read the flyer that is circulating around Durham, and just to make sure that the board is aware of it, and hopefully we have initiatives to take action against this. The flyer reads, New England Nationalist Social Club. We are a social club of nationalists from New England focused on building a network of like-minded men and women dedicated to defending their lands and their people. We oppose the criminal anti-American and anti-white street gangs such as MS-13, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa. We are for us, by us, and against those against us. Above all, we stand for the security and prosperity of white New Englanders. Our motivations to carry out this mission do not come from a place of hatred, but a love for our own people. No one else will protect us. The Nationalist Social Club is a pro-white, street-oriented fraternity dedicated to raising authentic resistance to the enemies of our people in the New England area. This takes the form of networking, training, activism, outreach, and above all, action. No matter how you got here, if you are a man of European descent in the New England area that wishes to see a better future for your people, contact us to get to work. For any and all inquiries, questions, or concerns, contact New England Nats at protonmail.com. So these are the things that are happening in our community. What if one of our learners gets these flyers? Are we educating them and telling them how to remain safe, how to speak up against, what to do if an adult approaches them, how to be safe and stand up without also getting themselves into trouble? So these are the things going on in our community, and these are the things that need to take priority. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Carl Durham. I was going to save my comments to the end, but Sounds like I should make some of them now, especially concerning the field house. As you know, I've been adamantly against it. When you have a budget that's considered excess, what you go after first is your luxury items. I consider the field house a big want, a big luxury item when you have the facilities here in this building that would be duplicated across the street. The other thing, one of the comments was made for is building the field house for fundraising. Fundraising, the Fair Association, when they have fundraising down there, the fundraising group takes care of all their building, their slab and everything. They support themselves entirely, not the taxpayers. I want to thank the board for all the due diligence they have done in trying to work with the budget and get it done. I know you take a lot of grief, but I neglect to say thank you sometimes myself. But thank you for all your time, all of you. The other thing is, I believe we should live within our means. The economy is not doing that great out there right now, if you take notice. Some of us may not be feeling it, but a lot of people are. And it's not looking that great for the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else? Last chance. Anyone else? Yes, thank you. We are now going to move on to item number 7 to discuss our district budget.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for all who came out. You guys didn't have to stay, so.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. So, for those that were not able to tune in to last night's work session, we discussed a target level to reduce the budget upon which we would come back with a proposed amended budget for the board to consider for tonight. And that number was 2.5%, meaning a 2.5% increase to the budget. So, I'm sorry, well, an increase from last year, but a decrease from the proposed budget. Thank you. Now I probably didn't say that properly. So there are 3 major changes that I want to talk to you all about this evening. Mostly about the third one, because the others we've kind of talked about before, but I still think it's important to see where I am in terms of my proposal. And of course, Kim is available as well when we get into the questions and answers. And we've also got not just our central office administrative team, but our principals and assistant principals here who have really helped us with, in the last week, trying to figure out where we were going to go. So, the first item is updates to health insurance and fuel. We didn't talk about fuel last night, but I'll touch on that briefly. Also want to talk about the field house. We cannot get through this discussion without talking about that. And then probably where we need to spend most of our time with reducing staff positions. So I thought it would be helpful. The screen in the slides is kind of clunky and we can't all see it. So Lucy, if you could send some of these down in that direction. And Kim, if you could send these down. And I've got a few extras for the staff and the public. Probably not one for every person. I didn't know exactly how many we were going to have, but let's see. Nick, do you mind passing those out? And hopefully I saved one for myself, which I did. So let me start with the health insurance and the fuel. And you can see the numbers there in red on the summary sheet. So we didn't mention the fuel last night, but you guys know what's happening out there. So roughly a $22,000 increase that we know about in fuel that we need to build in to this budget. So that cost us going forward. We did mention that the state partnership plan insurance rates came in at a 10% increase where they had originally been projected at 8%. That 10% is a final number. And we had mentioned to you all in an email and also last night that we thought that number was going to be $200,000 or a little bit more. The number for tonight is 150, provided the staff positions get reduced as proposed. If they do not stay, then we're gonna have to add some money back in, and that's gonna kind of compound the issue here. Let me talk about the field house briefly, and I know in an audience like this, we have a variety of opinions. And let me just tell you where I am with this, and of course, wherever the board takes this, we are going to support. Based on last night's discussion and further discussions with Kim earlier today, I believe we need to stay committed to that project, but I believe we're better served by taking that $180,000 and moving it into the capital reserve account, as was discussed last night for those that were on the Zoom. This gives us flexibility because there have been a lot of comments about we don't know exactly if 180 is the number. But I think it's also important to maintain our commitment to doing that. The other piece that helps us with putting it in the capital reserves is if it's not in the capital reserves, and correct me if I'm wrong, it really has to be spent next year. Whereas if it's in the capital reserves, there's more flexibility with that based on what we find the actual costs and scope would be. The other added benefit, if you see it that way, and you may not, is that we had originally in our proposal recommended 2% being set aside for capital. The board reduced that, and we understood that. You all were trying to get the number down. The reason we never thought about putting this 180 into the capital out of the gate was because we'd already proposed the 2%. So it really wasn't an option at that point. And honestly, we didn't think about making that suggestion when the last budget went through. But now that we've had some time to think about it, so that's our position on that. And we'll get to questions and discussions in a minute, but let me walk you through the staff reductions that we are proposing, and let me try to frame these a little bit. I did a little bit of this last night, but we probably have people here that didn't watch last night, and maybe it's important for you all to hear this a second time. And this is my history working in multiple districts, so what I say does not necessarily apply here, but I still think it's important to share this with you because this is my history as a superintendent and as a central office administrator. So I worked in a district from 2001 to 2009 in Northern Virginia, and it experienced what I would call explosive growth. It was on the I-95 corridor, Stafford County, if you're familiar with that, down by Fredericksburg. In the years that I worked there, we were adding between 600 to 1,000 learners per year. And so when you're in an explosive growth type situation, you have to add staff every year, and most of the staff that you add are teachers. I think that would just make sense. Don't have to be an educator to know that. It's just kind of logical. My previous district, Bedford, where I was for almost 12 years, we had declining enrollment every year but one that I was there, and the year that we didn't, it was like flat. And so every year but that year, we decreased staff, and the staff that we mostly decreased were teachers. And again, the reason is that's mostly who we employ, and when you talk about class sizes and programming and things like that, that's how it tends to line up. So what I would tell you about both of those districts, which is relevant to here, is when I entered both of those districts, neither one of those districts had anything resembling position control metrics or something that would say if 200 kids or 400 kids or 1,000 kids are added in a year, this is how many teachers we should hire, this is how many counselors we should hire. We didn't have that, but we developed those because we really had to, because our public demanded it, because our budgets kept going up and we had to be accountable to that, but we also had to be accountable educationally, so we were able to support the programming that was there. And it was hard. As much as it might seem exciting to build new schools and hire a bunch of staff, it was really stressful. But we did that. In my last district, where the enrollment was declining, we were in a situation, I think, similar to where we are here at RSD13. Again, a larger district, different scope, but we reached a point where our community was telling us, and we kind of knew, we had to kind of address this declining enrollment. And again, we needed some metrics to do that. And I was part of developing those. And again, we probably didn't do it perfectly, but people at least understood where we were coming from. And so If you all go back to February and the budget proposal, we had said to you all that we plan to develop those metrics for the following budget cycle, and we still do. But in a week, we did not have time to develop anything like that. And to be fair, the metrics that worked in my previous 2 districts are not gonna work here because we're smaller, but we still need to have them, I think, to be good stewards of the funding that we receive from the community and to listen to what they are saying. So, you know, again, the heavy lift here was not just for Kim and myself, but for the leadership folks that are present here tonight, because I think I had asked many of them to do things that they hadn't done before. But I needed their input because they are the leaders in our schools and in our district that see the impact day to day, and they're the ones I feel are best equipped to know how these reductions would actually impact our programming and make sure that we are taking a step backwards to the extent possible. And that is not to disregard suggestions that others have made about, well, why don't we eliminate this position and why don't we eliminate that position? We can certainly consider that tonight. What I am pleased with is that we as a team have come up with something that we think works, gets us to our number, and has the minimal impact on our programming. And so when you look at the list here, and I'll go through them in detail here in a second, the majority of the reductions are at the secondary level. That is because from the metrics that I looked at historically, we've had declining enrollment more precipitously at the secondary level, but we've had very little reduction of staff. And conversely, at the elementary level, even though we haven't done a ton of reducing, for our general education, we have class size guidelines that are very easy to institute, and we've followed those. And so those have been reduced over the years when needed, but we haven't done that in kind at the middle school and at the high school level. So if you look at the sheet, we've got teaching positions, we've got library media positions, and we've got other support functions, and that would be 9.5 of the 10.5 full-time equivalents that we need to reduce to get down to this 2.4% number. And that's on your sheet as well. You can also see the total change in the budget. We tried to just give you the highlights on this one pager to help you understand that. The elementary is not completely ignored in this reduction. We are recommending eliminating an elementary science specialist, but in case you're worried about the outdoor learning component of that position, the budget already has built into it, because that individual was retiring, funds to support the field trips and the outdoor learning segment of what that position did. This kind of takes out the curriculum support for the elementary science. So the class size guidelines for elementary are maintained, so there are no reductions there because they weren't warranted. Doesn't mean we can't consider that tonight, but that would mean you all going back to your guidelines and doing that. But I don't think you want to do that. And the reason we didn't land there is when you run the master schedules at our middle schools and our high schools, in many cases in the core areas, we have smaller class sizes at middle and high than we do at elementary. And in my experience, that is not normal. And again, that's not an indictment. It's not a judgment, but it is an observation. And in these circumstances, it's what leads us to this recommendation. So what this does do is it maintains all the programming. We're not eliminating any programs with this. We are perhaps going to have to combine courses that have very low enrollments, especially at the high school level, but we will still run them. Now, let me talk again about the elementary schools, because I don't want people to think that we just didn't look at that. We did. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but you all need to hear me say this in this context. Doing reductions at the elementary level while we are maintaining 3 schools is very, very challenging. We tried. It's just not very practical. And if you guys want to ask us questions about that, we can tell you some of the things we looked at. And just to keep it I don't know where this is going to end up tonight, if you all tell us to go lower than 2.41, I'm prepared to make more recommendations, and some of that will cut into the elementary likely. But we hope we don't have to go there. We hope the 2.4 is a good place to be. But, you know, the obvious move at the elementary level, if we can get our community there, is to move from 3 schools to 2. And then the efficiencies and the staff reductions will take care of themselves. But because of the way our elementary schools run, and our elementary schools do not run any differently than any place that I've been, we try to give good, solid programming in literacy, in mathematics, in history, and science, but we also have a rich related arts program, and that is a very difficult thing to manage in 3 small schools efficiently. So that's why, again, this is more heavily slanted towards the secondary and the elementary. So let me just go down the positions themselves, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the majority, again, are at the secondary level, 5 at the high school itself, a total of 3.5 teaching positions, combined from English, math, technology, and world languages. Again, no reduction of offerings, no reduction of programmings within that. We're also recommending the elimination of a security position. That is not the school resource officer position. We have both. Our recommendation is to retain the school resource officer, but to eliminate the security position. And we feel like, given the staffing that we have in general at the school, along with the SRO, that is adequate to provide security for this campus. We're also recommending a decrease in the library media specialist position of 0.5, and there's a companion of that at the middle school. This is reflective of the fact that, and this may continue into future years, libraries like the one we are sitting in were created for a completely different purpose than the way that education is happening today. All of our learners get Chromebooks now. Most of them have smartphones. Everything that, I would say you and I, but we're all in different ages. Everything that when I went to school, I had to go to the library for in terms of research, which was like my only option other than the public library or the encyclopedias that my parents bought. Our learners have access to 24/7 through their technology. And so we just feel like in a declining enrollment situation, and when we look at how our libraries are being used, that this move makes sense. And it's kind of a national trend. So again, that's nothing against the people we have in these positions. It's simply the direction that we feel like education is going and what makes sense. Now, switching to the middle school, similar to the high school, we have 3 teaching positions in the core areas, English language arts, math, and science. We also have 2 part-time tutors, one in math and one in literacy, that we're recommending eliminating, along with what I just mentioned, the 0.5 library media specialist, and I think I already covered the elementary science specialist. So before we open it up for questions, Kim, did I say anything wrong? No. Okay. Well, I may have, and she's just being kind. But again, hopefully this one-pager is helpful for you in kind of thinking through this. And so again, just to go back to where we were last night, the target was 2.5. We're at 2.41 because these things don't line up exactly perfectly. We felt good, though, that we were slightly even under what the board had asked. I have no idea who votes in these referendums to a previous speaker and how we get more people out to vote. I'd like to think that a budget failing would bring more families out to support this budget, because if this one doesn't pass at whatever level you all set it at, I feel like our next one would have to be even lower, and then the cuts would have to be even deeper. And again, just to reiterate on the 150 on the health, that is set with these 10.5 FTE reductions. If we were to scale back those reductions in some way, Kim is going to have to update how much we're going to have to increase the health to accommodate that, and that will actually kind of cut into, it will cost you more than just the cost to restore, is what I'm saying, because the health insurance is something that we have to pay, and so is the fuel. Thank you.
Thank you. Missy.
I have a question about the library media specialist at the high school. And maybe Corey can help me. Is it NEASC? Is that the governing?
I can address that.
Okay.
I checked.
Okay.
It's not an issue.
Well, because we were told it was an issue, and that's why they brought it up to a 1. Like, it was a 0.5, and then they brought it up to a 1 because of that.
Well, let me say this. there are advantages and disadvantages to having a superintendent who came from another state. I think one of the advantages is, I've been asking all these questions because it doesn't make sense to me that an organization, however you view NEASC, that we pay every year, even when they're not giving us direct support, would somehow have the power to tell us how to staff our buildings. And so I challenged them on that, and they immediately backed down and said, you don't have to do that. And they actually said the trend is going away from full-time library media, especially at a school the size of Coggins and the size of Strong.
I just wanna make sure that wasn't
Yep.
an issue.
No, good question.
The other question I have is, what does the current security person do? Because I guess I didn't realize we had one.
Well, you know, I always want to be careful. You know, we're talking publicly about a situation where we're not really naming names here, but here's an individual where it is just one person. And unfortunately, by the way, congratulations, Mrs. Stone.
Thank you.
You guys didn't know she's the new permanent principal, but you've been at the school all of what, a month?
Yeah, about that.
A month, and Katie has been there, you know, the better part of a year. So we worked with them together. Are you all comfortable, Deborah, you comfortable speaking to that?
Yeah, I mean, so he offers, you know, if we have students that are maybe having some challenges in the hallway, he will help out with that. He does do his due diligence at lunch. We let them go outside at lunch, so he's around at lunchtime. You know, he opens the building in the morning to you know, watches the other doors to make sure. But I really felt that, you know, our SRO could perform some of those other pieces. Mark's there a lot. Mark has an office in the building. Mark's extremely helpful. Jen, I mean, right? Jen's right down the hallway for some of the students that may sometimes have challenges. Now, I'm gonna defer to Katie because she's been there longer. I've only been there, like Doug said, 5 or 6 weeks. But your children are, in my viewpoint, pretty well behaved. And so, you know, security goes further than the behavior of the students. But I think, you know, making sure doors are shut and whatnot can be done by the other adults like they are in the other buildings. You know, not letting people in through the cafeteria at lunchtime. It's important, right? It's really important that we're not letting other people in. But I think there's adults that can do that. Did I miss anything?
Oh, I agree.
And Missy, I would say too, my input on this, of course, we worked with the high school administration on this, who know the situation better. I have been in districts that have had SROs in high schools much larger than this and have not had additional security officers. So I feel like that's there. The only school I've worked in that has had security on top of an SRO was a school of more than 2,000. And they had 2 security plus an SRO. So, you know, in an ideal world, we would have both, but we're talking about budget cuts right now, and so that's where we landed on this one.
And my last question, sorry, I'm taking it all up, but, so I feel like when you're saying there's cuts in the second, or when there's declining enrollment in the secondary, it was my understanding that that was mostly between 8th grade and 9th grade, not so much 5th to 6th to 7th. And I guess I'm just concerned, cutting the 3 teaching positions at Strong, what that's going to do to class sizes. Because and I could be wrong, and maybe Mrs. Gonzalez can shed light to this, but I guess I don't get that much information from my 6th grader, or for my 7th grader this year, but for 6th grade, I know that her class was at least 20 for those core classes. So I just would like to.
That must be 8th grade.
I would like to make sure that this is not gonna make those core classes like classes of 30.
Cheryl, are you willing to speak to that?
Sure. So right now, teachers in the core areas will teach 4, say it's a social studies teacher, they teach 4 classes and then they teach an explorations. So instead, we won't have the explorations and they'll teach 5 in their core area. With 100 students per grade level, that's gonna roughly be 20 students per class.
So is explorations going away?
Explorations, this was the first year of it,
Yep.
and yeah, it would go away.
Okay.
But students would still have tutorial and so forth.
Okay.
And I'm glad Cheryl mentioned that too, because again, and this is where, you know, even though Cheryl's only been there since September, These are things that she's noticed about even the effectiveness of the Explorations program.
Oh, I have
and-
opinions on that,
And,
and I'm happy
and,
with
you know,
it.
more so also, not that
Oh my God.
a teacher teaching Explorations isn't doing a good job, but if you're a history teacher, we want to get as much history teaching out of you as possible,
For sure.
and this does that. Something else that I would mention, and again, half of you roughly were not on the board last year when we did this budget, but it's interesting, because we're in this referendum that failed, there's a lot of tension on, oh my gosh, we're reducing staff. Last year, I recommended 3 teaching positions be reduced. We didn't have one public comment on that I recall, that Kim recalls. We didn't have any serious board discussions about that. 1 was at Strong, 2 were at Lyman. And you know, I put those in here after I got here. They weren't in the budget that I inherited, because I looked at the class size guidelines and I said, like, why wouldn't we just do this? And maybe I shouldn't have, but it's just what I kind of did instinctually based on what I said before. So again, these to me are not so much like major staff cuts. They're really just corrections from things we probably should have been doing in smaller increments over the past several years. And to give yourself a break, we were in a pandemic. So, like, why would you do that then? And so I think, and you know, I think what I heard from the community is, it's great, Doug, that you and the board are saying you're gonna do this next year. We can't wait till next year, the budget's too high. So that's why we're where we are.
And then, so if you're moving that 180 from the field house to the capital reserve, is it still going to have a name of field house in the capital reserve?
Yes. But it could be moved from the capital, from that name to
It can be reallocated by board vote to another project, or it can be canceled by board vote and returned to the fund balance.
Well, we're talking about the capital, moving the 180,000 into the capital. What does that make the capital percentage? The last time it was 1.3.
I have that. It is 1.84.
1.84.
So it gets us closer to 2%.
Right, I
And
know
again,
the
we're not smart enough to have figured that out on our own. It just, as you all talked about this last night, we were like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
So I support the increase to the capital. I do not support it having the name field house, which I expressed last night, and I'll say again in case people weren't on. I'm not saying I don't want a field house. My kids do play sports. However, I think until we have more concrete information, I just don't think that it's, you could take that money and that could pay for the increase in the insurance, in my opinion. But I am all about saving for capital too, but I think that we are not giving the right information. I'm on the building committee. We have not had a meeting and I don't know how long. We never got the information we were supposed to get. The place that we got, you know, the quote from doesn't service Connecticut anymore. So I just feel like saying, oh, we're gonna put 180,000, we have no idea if that's gonna cover it. And I just don't think that in a time where we're trying to decrease our budget, that we should be putting money towards something that we really have no idea how much it's gonna cost. Just wanna say it. I'm only on the board for another 7 weeks, so
Me
be
too.
mad at me after that.
Short timers.
On the,
Thank God.
on the high school, is the same situation that you talked about is in the middle school gonna occur by this reduction? You still will have the teachers teaching more classes or what?
You know, again, I'll
Don't
let
know.
Deb jump in here in a second, but generally speaking, what we're looking at is opportunities to combine sections and really take what are some very small offerings, and it's different. Let's just say this because it's important. High school is different than the middle school. We offer a lot more, and we should. It's high school. There should be a lot more options, but because of that, some of our kind of specialty electives we support at very low levels, and this is something that Deb and Katie and I have talked about that we probably need to address for future years, because I don't know if that's sustainable, but it's kind of where we've been for a long time. And so, do you want to say anything more about it, Deb?
No, you know, so, for example, we have somewhere between 80 and 90, if my number's right, coming from 80? We should have 100, but we're gonna be somewhere between 80 and 90, we guess. You know, like any teacher, they would like those students spread out further if they could be. Sorry, Kevin said if they
That's okay, I can hear you.
could, you know, we'd like that. But, you know, with my background and with my administrators, that's 5 sections of English, right? So when you think of it that way, you don't need 6 or 7 sections of English. Is it nice to have? So when we looked through our courses, not only can we combine some things together where the numbers are very low and do some differentiating in some of the elective places, but in the core classes, I mean, we're not gonna have classes of 30. We'll definitely, you know, have classes of 20, but we don't have classes of that size right now.
And that goes back to what I said I'm used to in previous districts where enrollment would decline. And the way it would work there is the high school administration would just be said, this is the number of teachers you're getting, and then they would go back and figure it all out and try to keep an eye on class sizes and all of those things. But I think Missy's earlier question as well, the class sizes are still what I would consider pretty good in my experience. I don't know Connecticut that well, but I've not seen class sizes like this really anywhere that I've been. And that's great. That's part of what makes this district great. But I think there's room to improve there, especially in these circumstances.
The math and literacy tutors, I know one of the things that we've talked about is the kind of the fallback in math that we've had because of COVID. Is there enough to still deal with that fallback in the middle school without without the tutors?
Let me say this before, and then I'll let Cheryl answer. We feel like we do, but the other reason why these two were selected is they are currently unfilled vacancies.
No.
And when you're doing an exercise like this, you know, and something else I should have mentioned too, and I apologize because we've been doing this so quickly. We are very sensitive to the fact that people are employed by us. This is their livelihood. We don't take that lightly in a situation like this. And if the board is going to support these reductions, or even any reductions that are significant, we would ask your permission to work with our bargaining units and with Kim and Kevin and others, and perhaps modify some of our retirement incentives to take advantage of people who are very close to meeting those thresholds, so that if they are interested, we're not going to kick anyone out the door, but if they're interested in taking advantage of that, which I think some of them are, just from sidebar conversations, that could essentially protect people's jobs who would have been eliminated. Now, that's no promise or guarantee to any employee, but I've done that in previous districts, and it's really been a good thing, and it really doesn't cost a whole lot, if I understand it correctly, Kim, right? Because typically a retiree tends to be higher up on the pay scale, and so you're saving that higher salary and you're paying not as high of a salary, and that maybe wash out what you have to pay in an incentive. Is that kind of the way it would work? Yeah, okay.
I think it's been a very long time since the district has offered any type of incentive. Yes. So, and that's always a good thing.
Can that be accomplished without a negotiation, just by an agreement with the bargaining unit?
I would have to check with our attorney if that's a negotiable item, or if that could be just done through an MOU. We do have a clause in the contract now, that says the completion of 20 years. And anyways, without getting into detail, there's something that we might be able to do through an MOU. I would have to get the answer to that, whether it be negotiations or not.
And there would be money in the budget under salaries to accomplish that?
Yes.
So we wouldn't have to put a special budget item up?
No.
If I can move back up to Coggins-Chog, this question perhaps is better directed for Katie, and sorry, Deb, another one.
Perfect. No, that's good.
So Trooper Hesseltine has an office here down, and he's certainly called upon frequently to visit the other schools. He's got engagements just for training to, just get with the kids. Certainly I know he does the chess club and had been, but he's asked to do a lot of things in our district. Is the communication quite good enough with you when he needs to go to another school? What is the protocol then to say, okay, Trooper's not here, who's taking over, who's just gonna be there? I mean, it's a bit antiquated, but Maslow's, hierarchy of learning is kids don't learn unless they feel safe. And coming from a school where we have 2 full-time state troopers and 3 safety personnel, the kids confide in them. I've seen it, even though we're blessed to have perhaps well-behaved kids, at least our perception is, they're meaningful. I used to not see it that way. Those people are meaningful as much as anybody on this entire staff. So do we feel confident without a backup?
So, yeah, to your question about communication, Katie and I have Mark's personal work numbers. When he's in the building, he's on the walkie. The communication is never an issue. So if he has to go to Strong or is somewhere just visiting, like doing a morning visit, he used to do at Memorial, and I needed him, he would come back in an instant. I mean, there's no 2 ways about it. And in none of the other schools, had someone like Mark consistently, so it defaults to us, right? We're the security, we're the people they come to, we're the people in the hallways. And that's an okay role for us. I mean, I've said about being up at the high school, right now, the least scary thing about being up there are the kids, because I know them, right? I had them all in school, and that doesn't default them to make them behave better, but it does give me that connection with them. The relationships that Katie has built, and then the relationships that my teachers have with the kids. I do think they feel safe. I don't know that the removal of this position would make them feel less safe. I didn't ask them, but I don't think that would be the case.
Thank you. One more on the library media specialist as well. This is a big room. I don't know how frequent students use it. I don't know. I remember it was quite active when I used to lay down over there and but
I think they still sleep there.
It's not as easy to hide between the stacks, though,
It's,
like we used to.
But is there going to be a pair of adult eyes at least to be here? Are teachers during free periods going to be asked to just come in and be somebody here, or?
Well, I see it more of a makerspace where they are here with teachers, 2 teachers together, a social studies class and an English class coming in, working together, and those adults obviously would come with them. We do have a para that's housed in here full-time. She's here all the time anyway, not just doing library stuff, she services children, but her office happens to be in here, and we're not talking about people, but that person can certainly do some of the functions. Kids check out their own books. I know they check out their own books at Memorial, so I'm sure here they could, if they are checking out a book, those kind of functions don't have to happen, but I see it more of a makerspace turning into a space where everybody can access it. Yeah, there'll need to be adult eyes, and of course, if there's a problem, then I keep saying, don't make the rules for the 10%, make them for the 90%, right? So we would address those things as need be, not assume that they're going to go badly.
Sure. Now, circling back to security, teachers, I'm sure, are encouraged in between passing periods to kind of hang out in the hallways a little bit as well, and that's always a valuable thing. For me, a personal change that happened that perhaps might be something to consider. Every teacher has prep periods. My particular union that I'm in bargained, and they said, okay, prep periods will be cut from 1 per day to 1 per week. So that was a pretty drastic change. We've been asked to do a lot more, and that's fine. You do what you can. You prepare early morning at home, but we're a big team to get things done. I think as much as we can just have all staff really, without stretching them too thin, just be part of the community, and ultimately it develops a better relationship with the students too. That presence, that a principal learning by walking around, just that is wonderful. And I've heard wonderful things, Katie, since transition has taken place and being more visible, and that's wonderful. Thank you.
I would just like to say something about the SRO. Having been in 6th grade, watching students go through the DARE program, I'm assuming they still have that here in the district? No. The relationship that those students built with the law enforcement officers that came in and worked with those students for the X many weeks that they were there was absolutely phenomenal. The give and take that they developed, the respect that was developed, the personal connections were amazing. These kids couldn't wait till the DARE program came, not because of the DARE program, but because the officer was coming in. And after the program was over, the officer would stop in every once in a while. Your whole class would stop, and they all had to go and speak. And of course, he also came at the end of the year. There were several of them. And they also connected, the officers also connected with the staff quite a bit. And it was an incredibly reciprocal, positive, you know, self-image building relationship for these students with the
And if I
the
can
law
just say,
enforcement officers.
Lucy, so Mark came down and read for, who I'm missing when you came to Region My School, Mark came down and read the same day. And those kids couldn't wait to write him letters and notes and invite him back. They bought a book, they all signed the book. So he is still developing those connections with the little kids, and I saw it myself. And, you know, the kids that are up here at the high school now know him by name because he's been around since they've been in the middle school. And they do respond well to him, just to echo what you said. So he gets enough time with the littles that they, you know him, and they really enjoy his presence, so.
At one point, one of the officers was having their first child, and the staff in the 6th grade, as well as the students, we threw in the baby shower. So, yeah, I mean, a lot was done. I have a question, or just, I wanted Kim to clarify something with regard to capital. When an item is put into capital, I mean, we wanted to make sure that we put as much into the capital as we could, because the amount we could put in was just raised this year. Once something is put in the capital, an amount is put in there, it stays there, is that correct? It never
Year
goes
over
back to
year.
the general,
It only goes back to the general fund if the project is canceled by the board.
if the project is canceled by the board.
Yes.
Can you explain what happens if a particular project, let's say the year goes by and it hasn't been started yet, then what happens with that?
It just remains in there until such time, so say you start saving for a project and then you skip a year because the budget doesn't allow for whatever, it just remains in that account until you fully fund it. If the board should decide not to fully fund it and cancel the project, then it's done by board vote, and then that just returns to fund balance.
To the fund balance, but it can stay in the capital.
It can stay in the capital, so the difference with an operating budget is you have the 1 year to spend it. If you don't spend it by June 30th, it just reverts back after that 1 year to the fund balance, end of the year surplus. But when it's in the capital, there is no time limit on it. It just stays in there until such time you use it or cancel it.
It's really called capital reserve.
Yep, so technically then, if the field house is put in for $180,000, that's $180,000 that will stay in the capital reserve.
Correct.
Okay.
It can be added to, if
Yep.
needed, or if the project were to be less than that, then the project would be liquidated at the end after it was expended, and that money would return to the fund balance.
Okay.
Or you can put 180 towards unanticipated.
You can by board vote, but you can reallocate the funds, yes. You couldn't call it unanticipated and then use it to build the field house. You couldn't do it, you can't do it that way.
Okay.
I have two other areas I wanted to bring up, because we've had a number of questions from the community, and unfortunately, Mr. Edinburgh left. One of the questions was, and Mariah brought it up as well, could you just tell us, before we start making any decisions, what exactly is in the budget for equity type programming and, you know, activities and stuff going forward?
What grants we have for EDI.
And grants, and, yeah, what do we have in our budget and grants and all that would go towards that? Because I know we've got a lot of questions about that.
You or Corey or Jen, I mean.
Or someone.
I can
You
answer.
wanna
and
start,
then
Kim, and then you guys can add.
So budgeted, in the, professional development line, I believe I have the right one, was $10,000 for equity. And then in service was $5,000 for equity work, so for having
That
someone
might be
come in.
flipped, Kim. That
Do I
might
have
be
it the other way
flipped.
around?
I think so.
So there's $10,000 for someone to come in for in-service and speak to the staff, or students, whatever, in service, and then there's $5,000 for professional development going out, or that can also be speakers too. And so there's $15,000, And then we have the Title IV grant that we've been getting, I don't know how many years, and that's for student success, and there's about 4 different categories you can use it for, and one of them was student well-being, which a speaker for diversity and inclusion is, and that's 10,000, is certainly a viable option, which is what we used for our speaker.
Do you apply for that one every year, the Title IV?
Yes.
So we do, yes.
And we've received
gotten
it every,
Yeah.
I believe in the past, we've discussed convocation this upcoming year, maybe the equity training for teachers and all staff in general. I mean, I know we've done some, but just to start the new year fresh and know what the expectations are. Then the students need to know what the expectations are and what the consequences are. All that, I think, would go a long way to
Can I
perhaps
add one
providing a better
more
climate.
thing? Sorry. So in addition to purchase services, so as Kim mentioned, we had the 10,000 in purchase services, 5,000 in professional learning, but we also have 5,000 or close to 5,000 for wellness. So that's just like an additional, it falls under wellness. This year we used it for a consultant in the wellness area, but wellness, it certainly could be under that area as well, so.
So if we add that all up together, that's $30,500 that is available for equity types of programmings for the upcoming year.
30,000.
30,000, oh.
yeah, because she's
Was this all
put around-
55 for wellness? 5,500, or was
just
it
five.
5?
Just 5,000.
Five.
Oh, that's where, I'm sorry,
Five.
that's where the extra 5 came from, so I, correct. Jan corrected, 30,500, 30,000. The other piece that came up is goals, what are our priorities? And I know we are in the process of training and pulling together a programming for Education Reimagined. And at this point in time, I think as you mentioned before, it's a little bit difficult to say, well, we're gonna need this, we have to move that, and we have to do this. And throw in that mix the fact that we don't know which schools we may or may not have, and therefore how grades will be configured, which is then gonna determine what the needs are. However, if we look at utilization, which is probably, along with the training with Reimagining Education, the utilization of our facilities is something that needs to be, and I'm sure is going to be addressed as soon as possible. Isn't that utilization in terms of how our plant looks and how our students are divided by grades, isn't that something that is considered an educational expenditure? Because utilization is going to lead to how the school district and the students are configured, which is then going to drive the reimagining. So technically, we do have our education priorities put into the budget. They may not look like they are, but they are, as we look towards utilization, and then we look towards the reimagining, which will then kind of come together more next year.
Yeah, well, what I would say to the goals piece is, the board received a draft of a strategic plan at our retreat in January. We've not come back and asked you guys to adopt that formally. Because there was so much turnover on the board, I felt like the original board, we'd even talked about some of those things back during the interview process for me coming here, but I didn't want our 4th and then 5th new member to have to come in and vote for something like that so early. But what you all did tell us was to go ahead and continue the planning, and so that has started. And so I feel like, the comment that we don't have any goals, I think it's fair to say we have them, but they're not really embedded into this budget because we're not far enough along in the planning process to do that. But if these teams do what we've asked them to do, and there's lots of people, and we've got over 30 people signed up for the training next week, and we hope to recruit more and more folks into the teams. Anybody out there who's not part of this, we'd love to have you be part of it. And so the hope would be, maybe no later than June or July, ask the board to adopt that framework so those teams feel very empowered. Because I think one of the things is they don't want to get too far down the road and have the board come back and say, wait a minute, did you really mean you were going to personalize professional learning for the employees and some of those things? They were in there. Not that any of you have said not to, but we haven't formally said yes on that. So I think I think what we're asking from the community is not just to join us in this work, but to understand the type of transformations that we are talking about, you cannot execute over a single budget cycle, and if you try to execute them too quickly, in my experience, they end up not working, and then people don't want to try them ever again. So we also need to get people more bought in to even what we're doing, and one of our teams is actually focusing on that and is developing strategies, not just to come to this setting, but other settings in the community to try to get more people educated. So again, it's sad that he left, but that engagement piece is actually embedded into that plan because it's the only way it happens. Now, the utilization piece, yes, I think it was last June or whatever, I think I said to you all, corn and linemen and what's going to happen to them, they're like millstones hanging around our neck, and until we make some concrete decisions, it's hard to make everything else fit into those. And unfortunately, that's where we got corn done, so that's great. But the lineman piece is still out there, and I think, once we get through this budget, hopefully in another week or so, I think we need to roll up our sleeves and get right back to that. And per our conversation last night, there are funds set aside in the budget to do some of that work. Maybe not all of it, but we're not in a position to say we need more than that 25,000 at this moment. Again, you all could add to that tonight if you think we should just do that. We hadn't proposed that at this moment.
That you're actually answering my question. I was going to wanted to refresh my memory of what we actually allocated for Lyman. Was it 25,000 that Doug just said?
Yeah, utilization
Okay.
25,000. Yeah, we didn't designate it just Lyman.
Right,
in there
but
for
it's there
utilization.
if yeah.
The other piece I'd kind of like to draw a little attention to is as we look at some of the staff cuts, we're looking at actually 3 positions that are actually vacancies. So if we look at the total number of staff cuts, 3 of them, 2 have already stayed empty and 1 is a retiring person. So it's not like we're taking a staff person and moving them out. There's 3 positions that are already.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because there's been some suggestions in some of our conversations about could we try to do a hiring freeze or not fill vacancies, and that has not been our approach. If we need a teacher in a content area or in a grade level, and we've had a few this spring, we are at least posting and interviewing. I don't know if we've hired yet. We want to make sure we get through the budget, and so we didn't do this exercise through the lens of how is this going to have the least impact on employees actually losing their jobs. However, we were cognizant of that, and to the extent that some of that can happen, like the tutors, it really makes our job easier in terms of the number of people we have to have conversations with about if we don't have a position for them, helping them find another job somewhere else, or looking at their certification, or trying these retirement incentives. And I think that's the other piece that we need to state up front. There will be 2 groups that feel stress from the employee ranks among this if it's executed, in my experience. The first is the group that I think we have the most sympathy for, and those are the people that we don't have jobs for anymore. But the other group will be those who we may have to say, yes, you still have a job, but now we need you to go to another school or another grade level or another subject area. And we have great empathy for those folks too. The good news for us from a planning standpoint is the rules around who loses their job in a scenario like this are very clearly articulated in the bargaining agreements, and that is very simple. However, the bargaining agreement does not give any authority to any individual staff member to say, well, this has been my job for 10 years, so you can't make me go somewhere else. We're going to try not to make anyone move. We don't have to, but we're always going to err on the side of what we think is best for learners, and we're going to try to convince people that they can do something that they're not currently doing. And I think our employees will step up. And my experience has been in a climate when other people are losing their jobs, those other people sometimes have a slightly different attitude about us asking them to do something else. Or if they have options, some may say, I'm going to resign, retire, whatever, and then that could save another job for us.
Okay, so that's kind of where I was going with it. Looking at these, it looks like we are only reducing at 1 grade level at strong. and I'm concerned about the climate at Strong and the relationships between all the kids that have been formed there, especially with Reimagine. We've talked about kids having a teacher or a staff member that they can go to at all times. They're establishing these relationships. So if I'm reading this correctly without saying names, there will be 3 teachers that will be removed out of Strong as they are tenured down to another. Because in my understanding, 7th and 8th can teach down, but 6th cannot teach up. Is that
So
correct?
what you're getting into now is something that we haven't done yet deliberately, because again, we didn't know how you all would respond to this, but also, we're trying to make this first and foremost about the learners, which I know is what you're saying too. But in terms of who would lose their job, I think what you're saying is if a lot of teachers have seniority at Strong, then they may not be the ones losing their jobs, but some of them may be asked to go to other campuses and do other things. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know if anybody wants to try to answer that. I don't know that we've looked into all the certifications, because some of our folks have different certifications, and my understanding is some of our middle school folks have like an elementary K-6 type certification, and others have subject areas, and some might even have secondary. So it really, we have to look at all of this, and Cheryl's nodding back there. Cheryl, do you want to say anything to Lindsay's question?
I think you kind of answered it. Several have multiple certifications, and he's right, some are K-6, some are middle school certified 4-8, and then we've got some 7-12 folks. So it won't necessarily come from one grade. It's gonna come from, however this works out.
And to your question about, and this is the team that Deb Stone is leading through our action teams on learning coaches and connection teams. We don't really know what that's going to look like, so I can't say that, I would not recommend this, because I think you know how passionate I am about that work.
Yeah.
If I felt like this was going to detrimentally impact that, I mean, it's more a fact of, we just have too many staff members for the number of children we currently serve. If you go back a number of years, and this year we're kind of making a major correction based on what our community's told us. And other pressures on the budget. I mean, if we didn't have this huge health insurance increase this year, this whole conversation is probably different. And that's nobody's fault. That's just, that's just health insurance.
There's also several teachers at Strong that teach more than one grade. Like,
And I will
Yeah.
tell you that you can move up grade levels if you have the certification to do that.
Right,
Because
I'm
I
saying.
did. I was
Some
able
of them
to
have to
do
take
that.
6. Okay. So you said that programs aren't eliminated, but we are eliminating explorations, correct?
Yes, and I do not view that as a program. And so let me just qualify. When I say programs, I'm talking about like a language that we offer, or a high school elective in robotics or music or something like that. I mean, of course, the enrollment has to be there for the course to run, but we've not heard that we're eliminating anything at this point based on these changes. It's really more about right-sizing class sizes, which again, we've done historically at the elementary level, because we have more of a clear line between, I am a 2nd grade teacher and I have 19 in my class, and that does or doesn't meet the guideline, and we keep a close eye on that. And I guess, I don't want to use the word fair or equitable in this, but there is sometimes a feeling when I talk to staff that elementary schools are hard places and there's a lot of responsibilities, and sometimes when they hear about these class sizes and things at the secondary level, it becomes a morale issue. And not, it's apples and oranges, it's different jobs, but this feels appropriate. And again, this was our team working together, and I want to compliment our team. This was not them, throwing down and cursing at each other. Like we all kind of see this, and we all kind of see it the same way, including the people at the secondary level, knowing that this is going to be a harder transition issue for them, but overall, we still feel like it's in the best interest of the children.
Can I make a
Hold on,
comment?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I-
right, Lindsay.
No, go ahead, I'll let Corey,
Okay.
Corey.
So I think, we all care about our staff. We have wonderful staff here and teachers. And I think one of the things that really helped us do this exercise is Doug said, you know, don't necessarily look at the people, but look at the positions. Because when you're doing an exercise like this and you're trying to reduce positions, you can't really think about necessarily the people within the positions. You have to think about the position, because to Doug's point, you don't know where the certifications lie. Sometimes there's multiple certifications and you don't know where tenure lies. So until you start looking at that list, that's when you get into the people piece. We did the exercise based on how can we move forward with this budget and look at the positions, not the people. And that's the only way to do that. Otherwise, you'll never want to cut.
The other thing I did ask you yesterday at the meeting to look at central office staff and the coaches. Did we not look at that?
Yes. Yes, and they were considered, and the team looked at that. I would say the others could speak more to the coaching piece, because I see that more directly impacting the school levels. And again, we're talking middle school and elementary there. We don't have that support at the secondary level. In terms of central office, again, I've only been here a year and change. I don't see anywhere that we can really reduce and not detrimentally affect the support that we provide to our learners and to our staff. However, what I would say is I've never been through a budget reduction in any district where that question hasn't been asked, because I think it's kind of a, I don't want to say an easy target, but you can say, well, this person doesn't work directly with children, so wouldn't it just be more appropriate to remove their position and not a teacher, like we have in these recommendations? So part of what you're getting there is my judgment, because in my last district, when I got there, we did remove some central office positions because they just weren't really doing a whole lot for the district, and everybody kind of knew it. That is not the impression I have. That's not the feedback I've gotten. The other challenge you have with this is that this is where it actually hurts us being a smaller district. Some of the responsibilities that we have are just as much in terms of state reporting and payroll and all of those things as a larger district. And so we're down to like one person doing each of those things. And the work that these people do is not noticed when they're doing it well. But the first day that someone doesn't get paid on time, so like, are we really gonna do away with our payroll person? But having said all that, we looked at it and I've asked, and if you all direct us to do it, we'll certainly do it. I just don't think in this budget reduction, that would be a priority that would be in the best interest of the district.
Can I add?
Yeah.
2 years ago, we did downsize one person in central office. We had one person doing payroll, one person doing accounts payable. When we purchased a new financial software, a lot was automated, and when the accounts payable person retired, we did not fill that position, and we consolidated it into one position. So we do recognize when there are efficiencies and moves we can make within there.
The central office also includes IT, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have, what, 4 people?
Yeah, one could argue that our IT staff is probably understaffed at this point, given that we've moved to Chromebooks and one-to-one and everything that we have done. But one of the things I may have told you guys, or I may have not, but I didn't see this coming. I didn't see the budget failing and all that. But, you know, I told the staff out of the gate, no ads. No ads. I wasn't going to support any ads. I would support replacements if we want to change this position to that. But knowing where we were coming in on health and all of those things. So there may have been legitimate increases in IT in other areas that we needed to look at. But in this cycle, you know, not that we didn't talk about them, they didn't make it into the budget, because I think it's kind of hard to add positions when you're cutting in so many other places. But these are things we're going to have to look at in the out years, especially, and I don't want to wind Ken up because he could talk to you for a long time about like the growing threat of cybersecurity and the more time that his team has to spend doing that, not to mention all these Chromebooks and all this other technology that we all want and we're all going to institute. So I think in future years, we're gonna have to look at that and determine if we need to put more in technology. Again, where are we getting that from instead of going to the taxpayers and asking them? We'll still ask if we need to, but kind of based on where we are, it may be a pretty heavy lift. And I don't know, does anyone want to speak to the instructional coaches? I will say, we did look at that at the elementary and at the middle, and quite honestly, we've got more positions on our list that we didn't show you. If as I said last night, if you all don't think 2.41 is enough, we can throw some of that out here now for discussion. My feeling was to come to you all with 10.5 FTEs was a lot for you all to stomach and even consider, and to go deeper than that. And again, because we did it in a week, if we had a few months and whatever, I think we probably could have landed in a different place. But I mean, Corey, do you want to take the coaching piece, because you've got the history on that?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. So since I've been here, we actually added coaches, we didn't decrease. And we found a real need for the instructional coaches to support teachers within the learning. When I first got here, our scores were a little bit lower, and our trajectory actually went up prior to COVID. So, and that is the hard work of the teachers, but it is also the hard work of the instructional coaches who are supporting the teachers within that work. In addition to that, next year we have some real heavy lifting, especially as you are in Student Achievement Committee, the structured literacy piece. And we are revamping and redesigning, and as we're moving forward with reimagining, those positions, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, Doug, but will probably morph into some type of supportive positions within the ranks. So I think we would be premature in cutting those positions, and I think we need to keep them as is right now.
And I guess what I'll add to that too is, although it's different job responsibilities, when we made the recommendation for the elementary science specialist, that really wasn't based just on the fact that that person was retiring. It was because we felt like we could manage that better. But that work doesn't go away. So that work is now going to fall on those coaches at the elementary level. So we're actually adding onto their plates. And again, my overall comment that I feel like there's very little room to downsize at the elementary. The majority of our coaches are at the elementary level. We also have them at Strong, but looking what we've already done at Strong, and I think this is important too, we felt like at Strong, these recommendations, keeping the coaches in place and downsizing on the teaching and the library media and the tutoring is still in the best interest of the learners. Now, you guys don't have to agree with us. That's just our recommendation and our opinion based on what we see.
Did you have any more questions?
Yeah.
No? Okay, anyone
Bob
else?
does.
Rebecca? So I think the toughest thing about this conversation is we're having it right now. I know that a lot early in the process, we wanted to have this conversation, and so I think that's the toughest part about it. And why, when the budget went down, there were a lot of questions about that. It's always good, even if you're not gonna cut staff, we just went through our budget process to look at where your vacancies are, where all of those things are, so if you should have to go there as a board, we know a little bit better, not because we wanna go there, but just because that's part of our responsibility to know those things, so that when we're talking with the public. I agree with you 100% about coaches, about central office. I think you guys are central office skinny. I know everyone always thinks that everyone's top heavy because that's what's always discussed. We have that in my district. We have, 7,000 kids, or sorry, 5,000 kids and whatever else, but no matter what you do, people think central office has too many people in it, and we never have enough IT people. The world has changed completely around IT, and IT is asked to do AV, and they're asked to do all this, like we never have enough. Coaches, it's a fabulous model. It's a model that it's been hard in some places to go to it and get teachers around it, but I think it's, when it's implemented well as you have here, it's the best model that's out there, at least right now.
We're the envy of a lot of districts.
Exactly,
We
and
really
so all of those things, I agree completely. I think bringing us 10.5 FTE that was a big lift. It's a big lift, I recognize that, that's a lot. I just think that that's the toughest thing about it for me, is that when I had spoken to Lucy and we had talked a long time ago at the budget process, I wanted to get out ahead of those things. I wanted to know those things so that we didn't end up at this point, at that point, just for knowledge base, you know, when people stop you in the supermarket and say, well, we're looking into it. But I agree about all of those things, and I think that this was an incredible heavy lift, but we don't have enough of the rest of this stuff, so let's stay out of that.
Doug, I had a question on, we always get asked about changes in administration, administrative staff, or clerical staff. I know that we have a vacancy in Memorial Principal. Have we ever thought about only filling that from inside to allow for, you know, somebody to move up and refill? I mean, it might be inappropriate.
So what
We
is
have
it that you're asking or suggesting?
That we fill the Memorial Principal from inside if we
With
can.
with an internal applicant?
If we get it.
Yeah, I haven't, those applications are flying in.
They're rolling in, Doc, I'll tell you that.
So I don't know if I hope we have internal people applying. Again, the tricky part would be if they are internal, depending on what they're coming from, it would be pretty arbitrary to say we don't backfill where they're coming. I mean, let's say they were a kindergarten teacher. You know, we still need a kindergarten teacher. So we would look for those opportunities, but we didn't build them into this proposal.
Would there be a chance to move based on qualifications, the director, I don't know what his title is, from Strong down to Memorial as principal?
The direct,
Fitzgerald. Yeah.
He doesn't have the
I don't
certification.
think he's an administrator.
He doesn't have the certification.
Yeah, he's not a certified
That was my
administrator.
question.
Yeah.
There are some that are certified.
Oh, yeah, we have people in
Everyone
district
knows,
that have the
we know that.
qualifications. I just
wouldn't ever recommend just, like, you gotta look at everybody that you
well, right, I
possibly
mean,
get.
I
yeah.
think if people have the certification and they know about the opening and they want internally, they will apply.
They will
for it.
apply.
I
Yeah,
don't think it's for us
yeah,
to-
but
I have no
to
shortage
Rebecca's
of
point,
them
I
out.
mean, to me, you want the best person. You hope it's an internal person,
Exactly.
because I think that can be helpful for morale and for continuity. But certainly, there's a few of us here that came from outside, and hopefully you don't think we were bad hires, you know, because, you know, sometimes you also grow as an organization when you bring outside perspectives in. But, no, I hear what you're saying. We didn't see any potential to leverage that into anything in this recommendation in terms of guaranteed budget savings. We'll of course be cognizant of that, but it goes back to my earlier point. It really depends what the vacancy is, and I think it's hard, even though it would seem like an easier, like HR type thing, to kind of manage by who decides to retire or who decides to move up into that.
Sometimes you get lucky that way, but I mean, if it's a shortage area teacher, you've gotta fill those shortage areas if you can. I mean, all of those, like, domino effects are real. They're a thing. Any other
What
comments?
about any sharing of arts and music and is that?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. This was something that the elementary principals, myself, and others discussed extensively, because really, this is where I thought those would be in this recommendation, and I kind of just glossed over this in my original comments. So I do believe that if we do not, on pretty short order, make a decision to close John Lyman or close a school, let's just say that, and consolidate in some way at the elementary level, that we will probably have to do that in the next 1 to 2 budget cycles. The particular challenge we face right now is twofold. One is that the 3 elementaries are not on the same schedule. Some of you have even brought that up. And so one of the brainstorms we had was, hey, maybe we could get them all on the same schedule, and then if we had to share some of these, that would work. Unfortunately, and I'm not saying Kim is the villain here, but she is our liaison to DATCO and the transportation. on a transportation, that would actually cost us more in additional bus routes than what we would save on the teachers. So we have a situation where sharing of those folks, it's possible, and again, if you all asked us to cut deeper, we would probably look into some of that tonight. But again, on short order, these guys, as bright as they are, have trouble guaranteeing that if we make those reductions, then they can make everything work as well as our community expects it to in those areas. And I don't want to be recommending anything that diminishes our support for the arts or for, you know, physical activity or music or band or any of those things. And so we're kind of a victim of our own situation here. But in full transparency, you know, we have a situation where we are full-time with each of those, on each of those campuses, and as a result, those people are being used to do a lot more than just their core thing. So an art teacher is doing a lot more than art at the elementary level, but we still didn't find an easy way just to eliminate one and share. Again, we could do that. It is much simpler if we just have 2 schools. And
I mean,
even
I would support it, I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, we had to think about it, and I think that's where I went into this thinking that we would land, because in my experience, it's very unusual. In the districts that I've worked in, if you had less than a full slate of art rotations at an elementary school, that art teacher would be shared with another campus. Again, we only have 5 schools, we only have 3 elementaries, and for better or worse, some of these positions were made full-time in the past, and sometimes it's much harder to unwind these things once they're there because it becomes an expectation. There's another nuance to all of this, and you're not going to ask me another question because you think you just get too much of an answer, but I think it's important. In our bargaining agreements, as you may know, there are requirements to provide dedicated planning time for our staff. That is a much easier achieved thing, as elementary teachers would tell you, at the middle and high school, because we have these multiple period days. And at the elementary, for better or worse, we depend on these related arts rotations to provide that. And so again, our principals, they tried to make this work, but one of their comments back to me was, we might get upside down with our teacher union because, yeah, we've saved here and there, but now our rotations don't necessarily provide that, in the way the bargaining agreement kind of suggests, but going back to like Corey talking about the coaching and all that, we've gone to great lengths, as I understand it, over the years to provide grade level planning and common planning, and doing that thing with related arts would probably just throw all of that into a very lesser version of what it is today, and that was part of the judgment that went into this recommendation. Yes?
And I just wanted to comment, you know, I think the related arts teachers have saved us over the last 2 years with our sub shortage. And we probably may have had to close school if we didn't have them.
I think that's a good point, and the principals mentioned that too. It's still not what they were kind of hired to do, but the truth of it is, these guys could tell you, when we have these unfilled vacancies, these guys are pulled, and it's advantageous that they can sometimes pull them, if I'm not out of place here, Tom or Deb, you correct me, maybe from their non-related arts duties. So the kids aren't missing art with the art teacher, but they're missing maybe the other lesson that the art teacher would have been supported when they're not. Is that accurate, Tom?
Yeah, everything's, yes.
Okay.
What you said is very, very accurate.
Yeah. So it has been a hidden benefit, and especially with COVID and everything, yeah, it's been nice to have. We are very blessed to have this level of staffing. I think we all need to kind of celebrate that, and you know, it's hard to do these things, but again, that's why we landed where we did.
Well, and it also goes into well-being. I mean, those schools are families, and those teachers are important to those children, and they support them in many ways other than just the related arts.
They do.
And I think that's important.
They do. I think the analogy to the middle school is the explorations, where, you know, when we had the staffing to offer that, okay, like.
Well, it also saved kids from sitting through 3 tutorials.
Correct.
The other, I'm just going through the list of stuff people have asked me. The other one is on clerical staff at all the elementary schools. There seems to be 2 or 3 or 2, I guess. 2.
Yeah, we looked at that, and the staff talked about that, and there were some opportunities to perhaps reduce contract lengths in there. In my judgment, the amount of savings you get from that and the amount of disruption that you get, it didn't make it into our list. We didn't see anything as drastic as we think we can eliminate a full-time clerical position at one of these. And part of that also has to do with just the sharing of staff. In my opinion and my experience, sharing principals and sharing front office staff becomes very problematic at the elementary level because you build relationships with these families and you kind of understand how the place works, and so we looked at that, but it didn't make high on our list. And again, you all are not in the schools as often as I am, and these guys are in them obviously every day because they work there. From my perspective, these people work really hard, and again, I keep saying this, it's gonna make people divide. I'm not trying to divide people, I'm just telling you how it is. Elementary folks look at their administrative staffing and they compare that to what they see at the secondary level, and they don't see fairness or equity in that. And that's been true in every district I've worked in. There's just better staffing at the secondary level. It's true everywhere. So I would be loath to recommend that, and we haven't at this point. But it's good that you asked.
The other one I've been asked is, what if Lyman becomes a neighborhood school just for Middlefield? Is there a significant savings in busing that makes that valuable?
I don't know that
Or
we've actually done the analytics on. Do you want to try to speak to that?
You don't have to answer that,
Yeah.
because that was another one that was.
Well, just the quick answer is I did do that sort of a study a few years ago, remember when we were talking about that? And really, there wouldn't be significant savings. Maybe it's one bus, maybe it's two, but there wouldn't be anything to really save a lot of money.
And the enrollment would obviously go down because there's less students and.
Yeah, I think I would be loath to look at something like that outside of our overall utilization discussion.
It's part of utilization.
Yeah, not to
I'm just
mention,
repeating stuff
not to
that-
mention, we've got all these families that are expecting their kids to go a certain place next year, and you know, to Rebecca's point, to me, this wouldn't be the time to institute that in a budget discussion, but I think long-term, it's a worthwhile question.
And my final point is that I have supported the field house, athletic facilities, whatever, because I go to most of those events. I've probably been, I think soccer is the most used to that field. We had a track meet there with probably 10 or 12 schools this weekend. I don't know how many, hundreds of people were there. I had to leave at 12:30 only because of freezing as well. But you know, there was already 10 people in line for the 3 porta potties, and I don't know what it was like later, but I don't see that facility related to football. I think it's related to all the other uses, and the other uses exceed football by a great factor, including graduation, including other events, and but I would support it going into the capital. I think Missy has a point of, if we could put it in there with some more flexibility, maybe call it athletic facilities or something where there's a name that would allow it to be analyzed for a field house if we get a project. You know, we are stuck from 3 years ago. We have not moved from 3 years ago where we were, which was ended up as, you know, a wood frame building was under $100,000 at the time, and let the booster clubs and others put in stuff that they wanted inside it at their expense. They could be shut off when it's freezing, so you didn't have to heat it. But we don't have any interest on that. So without that, the 180 is a guess. It's higher than what was the last thing we used. The people who were going to build it, Amish people or something, that don't work in the state anymore. So unless if we could put into the capital reserve with conditions that you know, we do figure out what this thing could look like, bring it back to the public somehow, and get it, but reserve some money that we could then move out ahead of time. I think that's a choice that splits this baby up a little bit between those who are actively pushing for it and those who actively hate it. And, but I don't know where that stands in the community. I just know that, you know, if you're out at the several hundred events that I've been to over there, that there needs to be some place to get a drink. You know, there needs to be a water fountain. Somehow we need to do something here to make that. I mean, you could even rent, you know, those really fancy porta potties they have at weddings where it's air conditioned, and you know, but something needs to happen to make that a better, usable facility for the people that are there all the time. The athletes are there, you know, and there's just not. I don't know. I just somewhat tired of thinking about this and
I'm talking about it. I'm talking about it.
And you know, we either make the final decision that, you know, this is over or this is going to happen. If it's not going to happen, we should provide some way to get a drinking water fountain out there and perhaps a better setup with porta potties. But I would think that if we could put it in the capital reserve, get the study done, figure out what it costs, and if it's too high, we move the money back into the capital reserve or we bond it. And then the people will have another choice on whether or not we bond it or not. But,
It's already failed to play.
one.
We have a nicer field than when I played on it, but everything else is exactly the same. It's a long run in cleats to the bathroom from there.
Well,
There's plenty of other schools that are bigger than ours that don't have them either.
I know,
mean, I travel
I'm
around
just saying.
as well.
yeah, I agree.
So,
I've traveled to lots of baseball
I'm not saying
fields.
it's not important. Like I said, you know, I have a hard time, I'm not disagreeing with the cuts in staffing because I think that they are gonna have to be made, but I have a hard time cutting staff and not cutting that.
But those staff cuts actually are occurring every year. This is a one-time occurrence.
But it's not gonna be a one-time occurrence because it's not just gonna be $180,000. It's not. It's not, because we don't even know if that's how much it costs.
It is for the fancy porta potties.
Well, I think to Bob's point, if we're gonna call it whatever we're gonna call it, we're not gonna call it field house, and we're gonna take a look at it, because we're gonna have to take a look at it anyway. We're gonna have to take a look at what would it actually cost, what is it that we're actually doing. We have to do something, or we're looking at doing something to protect it, so that's part of that inquiry. We don't have to commit right this second to, it's gonna be that field house. We are gonna have to look at it, and we're gonna have to do something,
But like
because
you
it's
said, we've
sitting
been
out
looking
there.
at it for 3 years. I'm finishing up my 3rd year on the board. I was elected
Stop.
to the, I was elected to the building committee before I was elected to the board.
Right.
It's been 3 years, and I know, yes, COVID is COVID, but we still are nowhere closer to where we were 3 years ago.
I have faith in this board, though. There's been a lot of turnover. My mom was on the board the last, like, when they first started having these conversations, and that's a long time ago. She did 12 years,
It
so.
was when I started.
Well, you know, we're old, Bob, so the time is kind of like morphs in this weird way.
And even if, you know, we put
I'm
the
the old
building,
white guy.
and then, you know, the booster clubs paid for the bathrooms, now we have water coming, we have to pay for water.
I think it's worth, you know, I
It's
know
gonna
you're
cost
saying
money.
we've already
The
looked
water's
at it,
there.
but I don't know
The
that.
water's there.
There's a
I think
different
it's
group of
your-
people
right,
with
but
kids
then you're gonna
and
use the
different
water.
boards,
That
so.
now costs money.
It's up to you
They're
guys,
using
though.
the water
I'm
now, it's just kinda
gone.
gross how they're using it. I mean, they're filling it up from a
No, but what I'm
rusty hose.
saying is,
So
isn't,
clearly on the board, it represents what the two towns do. I mean, we're having the full discussion right now as to whether to have it or not. I think that,
I was just telling you my opinion.
no, I love your opinion, but I'm just hearing this now too, and I feel like we've just belabored this for 2 hours, just to come back to exactly what we're already talking about, whether we agree or, feel that this is adequate. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would have liked the budget to pass and we talked about not cutting at all. But now we're in this position where we asked you guys to go below 2.5. You did. I think we're being very responsible. It's nice to see that many of the positions are positions that weren't even filled or are vacant, and retirements. The other ones, I'm confident. I have a lot of faith in the administration and you guys that you guys did your best to find the positions that are not going to affect any of the programs. And hopefully these positions, again, not putting a face to the positions, but that people, I know for myself, you have multiple certifications, and maybe with the retirements, people can move to a different position. And then going back to the athletic facility, I, again, have been on this board for 3.5 years talking about this, and I'm so tired of it. I think that we need to follow through. I've been a big supporter of it. I think that the money is in there. I like that we're being responsible with putting it in the capital reserve, or we could call it an athletic facility, but I do not want to remove it, and I don't want to keep having a discussion of whether we should have it or not. It's got a name, but we also, you said, we can, if we need to, rename it, cancel it, so that if with those situations do occur, then the board at the time can do something then. That's my 2 cents.
So I agree with everything you said. All my questions have been answered tonight. Lindsay went on the central office. I understand we can't do that. Moving forward, looking at the staffing summary, I see where we're over. Maybe in next year we can look at that. These staff reductions, to me, like you said, some of them aren't filled. So I'm okay
Very
with this.
responsible.
Putting the field house into capital reserve, because we can move it if we need to. We can cancel the project. Makes the most sense to me. Looking at the rest of my questions here, I don't see anywhere else. Again, with the field house too, someone did bring up ADA accessibility with the bathrooms.
No,
I really think that that's something we need to look into.
We did receive, I think we all received it today from a resident who is
I
unable
never
to
even
get
thought about
their
that.
the grandfather was not able to go to any of the kids'
Right.
football games this year because of no accessibility for the bathroom. For me, it was really interesting to see, from this standpoint, from someone who was in this way back when this all happened and this whole lawsuit happened, was that he reminded me that this project was already approved by the voters at the time. I know since then we've gone to referendum, so legally that changes it, but this was planned, it was voted on, and the only reason it didn't get finished was because of money that had to be paid out in a lawsuit. There's a news article from 2009, and I do want to read it because I do think this part is important. It says, Curlin and Vaccaro point out that the project is no different than what was brought before the voters, and items that are supposedly of concern are items that were addressed in the hearings. People want to know why someone would do this, and we don't have an answer. What they do know is that the attorney fees, already in the tens of thousands, are taking away from the additional items that they may have come in time. Tennis coach Karen Keene feels sorry for her players who are affected by the appeals simply because the lights and sound at the track that are considered problematic are all part of the package. It's all going to end up coming out the way we wanted, but taking much too long, said Keene. What happens is kids are the ones that will lose. It's a news article from 2009, and we're still talking about this. I think it's respectful of the opinions of both towns to put it in the capital, but I do want to say that I firmly support putting a very responsible structure on that facility slab.
Something I find very interesting on that outdoor facility is 5 years ago, constituents, people in Middlefield were all for it, just get it done, come on, time is now. And now those same people, won't name them, now that it's a difficult economic situation, are against it. So I have my opinions, I don't know what to think. You know, it's like, to go from that change in 5 short years, I don't know how to go about it. But one thing that concerns me is the bleeding of student population at this particular school. And I'm not all in for sports, I'm all in for everything. There's a morale thing that happens out there when I see, yes, there's a game going on, there's bands out there, there are artwork from art classes and community support. I've seen it differently now in the sense that it is a really good morale builder, a climate thing. We don't want to keep losing students to Xavier. And it's always gonna happen, we know that, in Mercy, in the trade schools. But we need to stop that bleeding, otherwise that number of, cost per pupil that we so dislike to hear, but it's just gonna keep going up. And anything we can do to really just make it a better climate for students who want to come here and continue to come here, and their brothers and younger siblings to come here, we need to do that. And speaking with some of the Durham Fair people, if it's a Durham Fair type of building, the practical side of me says, yeah, I don't like this having to maintain. I don't like the burden on the maintenance. I don't even like having coffee here, okay? From what I'm hearing is there's some very low maintenance buildings. I would just ask for support from the community just to help clean up afterwards or something along those lines, because I don't want it to be a burden if this does happen to our maintenance staff and so on. They've got enough, I'm sure. I don't know specifics, but that's the practical side of me. So I'm not really giving any solutions here, I'm just throwing a bunch of things out there.
There's no question that this, I like the term athletic facility, needs to be vetted. It was very difficult for me to be able to get together our building committee the one time that they met. It took a long time to finally get that meeting, and they were given the charge to upgrade the building, give us some feedback on it, and it never materialized. So there's no question in my mind, wherever this athletic facility money goes, that right out of the box, that committee has to meet and has to start giving us some information. I mean, I'm already on it, but it is frustrating that we never did receive. And I know that's a question people have, what is gonna be the ultimate cost? Because there's a lot of unknowns, and I agree. And I tried to address that, but we didn't get the information that was needed. But that doesn't mean that we're gonna sit back and let that continue. We need to get that information. It's critical. Any other thoughts as we move forward? Because
I just have a question. Do we know what the impacts are for each town with this new revised budget?
Yes.
Yes, so, Durham will receive a, reduction of $369,737, and Middlefield 203,232.
From the original.
From the original. And I just want to point one thing out, which Bob did mention yesterday on our work session, but of Middlefield, so Middlefield's new increase will be $1,086,000. $816,000 of that is because of the enrollment shift, not new spending.
What's that number again, Kim?
So the impact, the total cost to Middlefield? $1,086,338.
Okay.
And Durham is actually gonna have a savings of $181,326. It's actually gonna be less than last year. And again, the portion of that $1,800,000 of that is the enrollment change. More students means you pay more. And 270 of that is just increased spending, contractual obligations and
So
whatnot.
270 is the actual impact of the budget increase in Middlefield? That-
Correct, outside of the enrollment.
Outside of the enrollment?
Shift, yes.
Okay. And that's important, because we don't have any control over the changes in the enrollment, so, okay.
Years past, Middlefield has had declining percentages, and has had years where it was actually less than the previous year. Their cost of education this year didn't work out the same way.
Lucy, you and I used to talk about it when we were on the Board of Finance together all the time, but it still comes, no matter how many times we talk about it, as a shock to everyone when it happens. It's just one of those
And
things
to
that we
your
can talk
point-
about it over and over and over.
The cost, I guess, Council of Small Towns is talking about, and actually Laura Francis and Ed Bailey and now Bobby Mateo are very active in that, in trying to get a 5-year average for enrollment, so we don't have these big hits every single year, but that hasn't been passed, has not been approved.
Interesting. Okay, is there anything further that we want to throw on the table? Because at this point, we have to vote to decide if we're going to accept the changes to the budget as proposed. And then we also need to schedule the district meeting and vote to approve the warning of the district and referendum. So right now, we're looking at voting on the revisions to the district's fiscal year budget as they've been presented tonight. Unless we have anything else that someone wants to say. We just gotta make sure we get it all out.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so, do we have to put the specific amount, or just
Yes, you do.
simply? Okay, so the motion is to approve the, what's presented?
You don't have
The
to
number?
revise, no, a prepared
No,
motion.
not for the,
37,
I'm not talking about the district meeting, it's just that the motion to approve what's
The
been
revised budget.
presented.
The revised budget.
The revised, thank you, I couldn't think of the word.
It
It's
happens
getting late.
all to me more and more.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the revised budget, 2022-2023 budget, in the amount of $37,915,970, which represents a 2.41% increase from the 2021-2022 budget. So we need a motion for that.
So moved.
Lindsay? So we have a motion from Lindsay, and a second,
Second.
Amanda. Any other discussion?
This includes, I just wanna clarify, this includes moving the field house to the Capitol.
Yes.
Oh, and moving, right.
That's okay.
Moving the field house to the Capitol. Could we also consider changing the term from field house to athletic facility?
Yep.
Just because you change the name doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't change what
Or
it is, but
athletic
I like
think it-
outbuilding.
I think it kind of broadens the scope.
How about athletic
Could have an
upgrades?
outhouse.
Oh, pretty
Athletic
porta
upgrades.
potties. Is
I'm
that
sorry
part
to
of the
interrupt.
motion as well? That would be part of the motion, to change the name from field house with the.
No,
that's
No?
all.
Oh,
No.
okay. All right, just
You're good.
discussion. Okay. So, all those in favor? I think we probably should go around individually, say your name and say, whether you agree, yay or nay.
Amanda, yay.
Maura Caramello, yay.
Missy Booth, nay.
One more, yes.
Lindsay Dahlheimer, yes.
Lucy Petrello, yes.
Amy Rohrbach, yes.
Becca Adams, yes.
The motion passes. Okay, so now we move to actually scheduling the, meeting and the referendum vote. And I believe we need to add the amount in here, which was, oh, here it is, I got it. Let me just write it in here. Cause I'll have you read it. Do you have
Thank you
your copy?
guys for
Thanks,
coming.
Ed.
Do we have to put anything else in here? I think it's okay.
Regional School District 13 of the State of Connecticut, Durham and Middlefield, warning of district meeting and referendum vote. Notice is hereby given to all those eligible to vote in town meetings in the member towns of Durham and Middlefield that a district meeting of Regional School District 13 of the State of Connecticut will be held on Monday, May 23rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Julian Thayer Auditorium at Coggins Regional High School, 135 Pickett Lane, Durham, Connecticut, for the following purpose: to present the amended proposed budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year as prepared by the Regional School District 13 Board of Education. The moderator shall adjourn the district meeting at its conclusion, and the budget shall be submitted to a vote upon the voting tabulators in the district's member towns of Durham and Middlefield on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, in accordance with sections 10-51 of the Connecticut General Statutes between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. under the following heading: shall the proposed budget of $37,915,970 for the 2022-2023 fiscal year as prepared and presented by the Regional School District 13 Board of Education be approved. Those in favor shall vote yes. Those opposed shall vote no. Voting will be at the following poll places: Durham, Connecticut; Cogachug Regional High School, 135 Pickett Lane, Durham, Connecticut; Town of Middlefield Community Center, 405 Main Street, Middlefield, Connecticut. Copies of the proposed budget will be on file and available for public inspection in the town clerk offices in Durham and Middlefield at least 5 days prior to the district meeting. Dated May 11, 2022, Lucy R. Petrella, Chairman, Regional School District 13 Board of Education.
Is this a motion we have to approve?
So you do need to make a motion,
Okay.
and I pulled up last time.
Okay.
The motion would be in favor, sending the budget to a district meeting on May 23rd, followed by a referendum on May 24th, with the 22-23 regional school district gross education budget of $37,915,970. So that's the motion.
Okay, so we need someone to make that motion.
So moved.
Lindsay, and second? Second. Rebecca? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passed.
Can we do that backwards?
Pardon?
Can we do that backwards?
Can we have a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Bathroom.
Yeah, we're gonna take about a 5-minute break. We've been sitting here for a while if we need it. Thank you. Ms. on to item number 9. I'm glad we need Bob. Here he comes. We're gonna have committee reports. First for a report of the meeting and then a possible vote on some of the policies that were discussed.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm in the mood to talk. That's what coffee does to me. Oh boy.
No,
There's more coffee for you.
We had several policies that would come up. The first one was the advertising policy we have for different things like, including the signs that benchwarmers are putting up on the fences and things like that. When we wrote the original policy, we didn't include the ability to use that money for scholarships. And benchwarmers asked us that because of the amount of money they're getting, that some of it should go to increase scholarships. That wasn't in the original policy that it could be spent on, and so as policy crews, we recommended that we add the ability to have the money used by those that advertising to be used for scholarships as well by the third party. So it would require us to adopt, add for scholarships into the current policy.
And we'd be adding 2 words to that policy, right, Kim?
Correct. Right now, it reads that the funds will revert back to the district for use in its programming, which scholarships are technically not a part of that, so it would just say programming and scholarships.
So we didn't think we needed to have 2 reads on that since it's just a minor change, and it would be actually available for students this spring. So we recommended that policy to be voted on tonight. So we have an agreement or discussion, we have a motion to do that.
Do you want to go through all of them or just do one at a
Do
time?
one at a
Well, they're all
time.
different.
One at a time, yeah.
Well, no, I meant to do just a report and then go back, but
just
now
do
while
them.
we're here.
We'll
So,
do them while we're here.
so a discussion to add.
You have to do the motion of the discussion. So I'll make the
Thank you.
motion.
I'll second it.
It's getting late. The motion is to add scholarships to the advertising, promotion, and commercial activities policy. Any discussion?
No, I just think something we had talked about at policy too is this gave them the ability, when they didn't have funds that they were applying to needs at the time, that they could use those for scholarships. And we felt that giving a cap on that wasn't really fair to them, considering it's the money that they have and they're spending on COG and CHOG athletes, so that's all I have for discussion on.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adding scholarships to advertising, promotion, and commercial activities?
Aye.
Signify by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
And the next item was the review of the regional school properties policy and fee schedule. We talked about the fee schedule that being in some cases burdensome, and we might be able to get more use of the facilities with a revised fee schedule that didn't have a maximum for no matter how long you used it and was more related to hourly use. And Kim has there's a whole schedule of fees for different kinds of things, including custodial activities, energy activity, and a variety of other things. And Kim would, if we agree to this, she would come back next meeting with a list of revised fees. So we don't have, if that's okay for you to move it, the only motion would be to have Kim bring it back with a revised schedule of fees.
And the desired outcome is to be able to actually generate more revenue through more people saying, oh, $1,000, no, $500, I'll do it, and then somebody else will come up and do it. It could be a good thing.
Yeah, some of our fees are prohibitive against anybody who wants to use the auditorium or
I'm not sure that we actually need a motion because it was
Right.
recommended by the policy committee to send it to us so that you're just being made aware of the fact that it's probably going to be on the agenda for the May 25th meeting.
and we'll
Jim?
get those scheduled out to you before the meeting.
Right. because we're not making any changes to the policy, just letting you know that the changes will be coming up at our next meeting.
The next was the recommendation for the purchasing procedures. This came from the finance committee, and Jason's not here, who chairs that. But he had recommended a change in our policy, which would require us to get quotes for smaller amounts. And he recommended a $5,000 purchase would have received more than one quote, or 2 quotes or 3 quotes.
3 quotes for 5,000 or over.
And our policy kind of ended up with, we think because of the magnitude of the activity we have, that a $10,000 limit on where this takes effect would be more appropriate. So the $10,000 plus 3 quotes if possible, and that would then need to go back to the full policy and written in it, and we wanted to wait till Jason comes here to recommend it, but we wanted you to think about that for the next meeting, which is on 25th.
And we ended up with at least 2 quotes for $10,000,
Yeah.
preferably 3, is kind of where we were at.
If possible.
What's the current amount?
25,000.
25,000 right now requires us to go to bid.
Bid is different than procuring.
Right.
You can, on the one, you have to go to the actual bid, on the other, you can solicit bid.
Yeah.
You can solicit proposals from people.
And most of the stuff that we buy is on the state procurement list, so it's already gone through the vetting process, and so you don't have to go through that process when you use those things. But there are some smaller items that we have to purchase that, you can't, it's hard to even get quotes today.
So we will think on that and then move that to the 25th?
Yes.
Yes.
Finally, the next one was the definitions on the equity policy, and Joanna's here. I'd like to have her just try to speak about what is going on with this, just because she's put so much effort in it, and let her talk instead of me.
Hi, I have a sinus infection, so just let me know if you can't hear me.
I can help her along.
So these definitions were put together by the CARE student ambassadors, 6th through 12th grade.
Does everybody have them first?
Yeah.
Do you want to use the mic? Would that be better?
That's fine for me.
Are you okay?
Thank
All right,
you.
go
Yeah. So we started in our very first meeting looking at the equity policy and pulled out keywords. And then the students did a ton of research on definitions, and as you can imagine, there's a million different ways that these words can be defined. And so what we did was really look at what we thought was the best fit for our district and where we are currently. And so I think it's important that even though there's 3 bullets under equity, it's important to define it, but then we also want to, eventually we really want to get to what it looks like. And so that's the next step, is really operationalizing the definitions, which we've talked about. So there were 3 high school students that really did the bulk of synthesizing all of the research that had been done. And then we put this together for the students to review, and this is what their final document looked like. And so I think if you are willing to bring it into the actual policy, I think it will help to inform the teachers of what we mean when we say these words, so that we can start to develop a shared language, and then we can start to really teach our students what those words look like and sound like, and kind of make them embedded into our students' education more like the core ethical values, because we want our students to recognize what equity looks like, what accessibility looks like, and how we can be a part of that process. So this is really mostly student work that's just kind of been finessed and looked over by me.
Yeah, the policy committee voted to bring this forward to the board for a full vote tonight to adopt these as an amendment to our current equity policy. So if there's any
I
questions.
just didn't have a chance to read it.
Yeah, I
Is there a
know,
way
it's
that we
up
could?
and I'm exhausted.
Is there a way we could just vote at the next? Or I'll abstain, it's up to you. I don't feel right voting on something I haven't read.
Okay.
Not that I don't
That it
trust you.
isn't good, it's just.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading.
Think about it.
I do think it was, I understand what Missy's saying, I do think it was important, especially for Strong in the High School, to have these, on the 25th, that's what, another 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, we originally moved the policy, the committee from last week to this week, so you didn't get to see it, but,
Well, and I think Meg might have sent this, but I'm just not on that committee anymore, so I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read it, so. Again, if there's enough people that wanna vote, I'm fine abstaining, but I don't feel comfortable voting. Anyone else?
What's the board's pleasure, to go ahead and vote, or wait till the next meeting?
Well, we can
I'm comfortable with
I'm
voting.
comfortable with voting.
Yeah.
Jamie?
Yeah.
I am fine,
I
I'm
mean, I
very
think if
happy
enough
the
of you were at
students
the
had a
meeting and
large hand in it,
discussed it,
so
then-
how could we not?
Maura?
I agree with Jamie. I mean, I trust you guys that I didn't get a chance myself to read completely through it, but I did get halfway already, and it sounds wonderful. I think it's very needed. If you guys feel it, I mean, I didn't know what the rush is, like a week or two, I'm not sure, but if there's a rush to get this added right now, right this second, then I'm fine with the vote.
I think it's because of when it was done, these kids worked on it, was like a month and a half.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
whatever you guys are comfortable with
Yeah.
is fine with us, but it would certainly be a win
I'm
for
sure
the
it's
kids.
fine. I mean-
I mean, I think the kids worked on this,
Yeah, you read
after
through it, right?
well-being, yeah,
Okay.
several times, but.
And
Okay.
it doesn't change our policy at all, it just gives definitions to
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
that.
I'm fine with that.
The
For the
well-being
kids.
committee already looked at it and supported it and moved it to policy. so.
Okay.
And, you know, I read through the definitions, and I found they were very well written.
I love the
Extremely
visual
well
too,
written.
Joanna. That's
Mhm.
like really
We've been
sums it
using
up
that
right
for a
there.
while.
Now, there was one change under accessibility, and I'm not sure
It's-
which copy you
it's-
have.
You have it.
The black and white copy is the updated copy that has the
Accessible,
definition
it says
for
accessible
accessibility.
education
Right.
is the process of designing courses, and it goes on from there. Do you both have that?
We all have.
Does everyone else?
So as long as we're still including what the legal definition that we have to have of accessibility under the ADA, then I don't think it's a problem. We have to have both under this policy.
We have that in our other policy.
Yeah, so, yep, that's all I.
Okay, so moving forward, we would need a motion to accept the definitions that were submitted, to add them to the equity policy as they were presented.
I would make the motion.
Okay, that's Bob and Lindsay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
I'll abstain.
Okay, Missy?
Thank the kids.
Yes.
Thank you guys
Great
so
job.
much.
Get better.
Great job.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
And the last one is, the state statutes and regs have changed on immunization. We have, policy that is, what you've got in your package was the shipment and movement proposal that changed the policy, changing the immunization requirements for all students. And, Jen, you wanna just explain it, and then we don't
Jen's like,
need,
I
we don't
did.
need to do it tonight, but we think that it should be read by everybody, and actually the language for the final adoption, we just finished earlier tonight, when we can vote on that for the 25th as well, but, so we can just explain it quickly.
The policy is very similar to the one we already have. It just is an update to our current policy that takes into account state regulations and what it updates Connecticut state law in terms of immunization requirements before the start of school. And it takes out the option for religious exemption.
Okay, and again, that will be, sent out with the information for the meeting on the 25th, the revised.
You want to put that on the 25th?
With the final language as
There was some discussion on policy, and the sad thing about the state requirement is that we've got students in our districts that their siblings are no longer gonna be able to go to school with them, because the siblings have the religious exemption, but the kids coming into kindergarten do not. And their religious exemptions do not follow them from where they are now into our system, so. It's very sad and very hard for our administrators to have to deal with, so.
And that's all state law?
Yes. That's it, yeah.
Yep, state
It
law.
wasn't but a few
so.
years ago, I remember Lyman School was identified as a school that had high, people not being immunized, and I hope that doesn't continue, and that means they can't come to our district anymore. TV school.
That critical mass section, they really started to see it at the state level. I was still lobbying them. You get to a certain point where it became a public health concern statewide. There were so many schools that were not hitting the target from a DPH standpoint. So that's how we ended up with the legislators telling us what to do or not to do.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it. Great. Item number 10, superintendent's report.
Oh, that's right, we did the order, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so.
change the order, sorry.
No, you told me that, I just didn't write it down, so, there's a few things I'll share or offer to share, and then you all tell me if you actually want us to do it tonight, given the lateness of the hour, or bump it. But the one thing I do need to mention, I think is appropriate in this moment, is to congratulate Lucy and Bob and Mariah and Linda Darcy, who I don't see here tonight, you know, there were elections Monday amidst everything else going on, and so looking forward to continue working with the two of you, and Mariah to bring you on, and Linda also, and you know, the staff and I will do everything we can to make your transition and Linda's smooth as possible, and Meg may have already reached out and talked about, you know, some orientation things that we can do there. Programming note that we discussed at policy committee is that we have another policy committee scheduled for next Wednesday that we decided we're not going to have. And, you know, I don't want to jinx us here, but unless you guys are dying to actually have a meeting next week, and we've had so many, there is a utilization committee on the books for next Thursday.
And I'd like that.
I would think we should cancel that, or no? Okay.
I would like utilization to meet.
Okay. Yeah, my thought was until we get through this budget, there's not a whole lot to talk about there, but if you want to have it, we can.
We could have some
There's plenty to talk about, even without
Okay.
getting through this budget.
Let's have a meeting next week.
I think there's a lot to talk about, actually.
I got on board, so I'd like to meet.
Okay. All right, so the other two items, at our most recent board meeting, and I know we've had a lot of meetings in between that, Lucy had asked that we kind of give an outline of some of the work that we're doing and some of the work that we have done in this equity space, kind of over the years. A lot of folks, kind of in the aftermath of the Calvin Terrell presentation, have said that was great, but like what else are we doing and what are we committed to? And I think those are reasonable. So I was going to ask Corey to kind of summarize some of that tonight, if you want it tonight, and if not, we can do that next week. I don't want to rush through it or not give it justice. I'm just thinking of the lateness of the hour. So, and the other one was Ken can give a short update. A number of you had asked him to look into you know, hybrid meetings and Zoom rooms and all these different things like Durham is doing. He can do that tonight quickly too, or that can be pushed off for a couple of weeks. It's really up to you guys. Neither one of those are necessarily like short discussions. I don't want them to be rushed, but they're things you guys have asked for, so I don't want to necessarily push them off if you guys want to hear them.
The only concern I have about pushing it is that in 2 weeks, that meeting was supposed to be just an executive committee, and now it's full. So we're already gonna have another late night in 2 weeks.
We have an executive session
Okay.
on the 25th.
So.
All right, let's roll. Is that your pleasure?
I think, especially about I think it's important because people have been asking.
Yeah, they have, and to be fair, Bob had me brief this at Wellbeing in early April, but, you know, those aren't live streamed, everyone doesn't go to Wellbeing, so Corey's just gonna share the similar information, but she'll do a better job of it, because
Oh, now you're
she's-
setting me up here.
Well, you've done more setting all this up, so go ahead.
Okay. So, just to look at the past for a minute, back in 2018, our district developed an equity team that was comprised of some board members, the town managers, administrators, and some teachers within the district. And that was as a result of an issue that had happened in our district, and we realized that we needed to do some work with equity. So we had CERT come in and provide us with the Courageous Conversations training. We also had a partnership with Middletown at the time. We had developed that, and so our high school students had a book discussion group with Middletown High as well. And Dwight Sharp, who is now working with us, at the time was the equity coordinator over in Middletown. So he was working with us. Melissa Gonzalez was our lead here at the high school and helping and support that work. And she was also on our equity team. Currently, what we've done, and in addition to that, our high school also had the Courageous Conversations training. So this was all prior to COVID. COVID hit, we had put a little stall on our work with equity, and then moving forward, we developed a relationship with CERC again, and we continued the training with the middle school this year. And so all the teachers were trained this year in the Courageous Conversations with CERC. And in addition to that, our ELA department, our social studies department, and our related arts department at the high school had additional training. We also are sending select personnel to the CERC, or they did attend the CERC Equity Summit, which was on May 6th, this past Friday, and that was all virtual. And CAS also had an equity conference with the State Department of Education, and select administrators were also given the opportunity to attend that and did. Through consultation with CERC, we brought in Calvin Terrell, as you all know, so that we had assemblies with the middle and high. We had the teachers, that joint staff meeting of middle and high school teachers, and then the evening community event. But it is not a one and done. CERC is coming back. They are working with the middle school and high school staff, having some conversations with the social studies department in particular, also working with the middle school and going into some team meetings and working with teachers. They're working with our care students who Joanna works with after school, comprised of like 30 students between the middle and high school. And so they're working with them as well. And they'll also be working with administrators, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. We also invited Cheryl Sharp and Jody Walker-Smith, who are attorneys with the Commission of Human Rights, to come in and provide our ADCO, our administrative staff, with additional professional learning around the area of equity. And they were excellent, and they were free. It was an excellent training. We are also in the process of working with ACES, who is going through and doing a curriculum equity audit for our social studies department, K through 8. We will hit the high school, but we haven't done that yet. So we're going to start with the elementary and the middle school, see what their report says, make some revisions, and move forward with the high school next year. We also have the social studies department at the middle school is very interested in just kind of continuing their work on equity, and they are doing a book discussion group amongst themselves. The book that they are reading is called Cultivating Genius, an Equity Framework for Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy. And that was recommended through something that I had attended. Actually, it was the equity group from ACES that has been organized. And so there's a lot of different folks who are the equity coordinators from around different districts, and wealth of knowledge. And I was able to pick up some of their resources through that. We also, Doug and I met with so many consultants. CERC, through Learn, Linda Darcy was actually somebody that we had spoken to, and we loved her. And now she's going to be on the Board of Ed, so we can't hire her. Anyway, so she was somebody that we were talking to as well. ACES we have spoken with and are working with. There's a man named Deacon Art Miller who I'd reached out to, wonderful person, Gerald Hairston from Newington. He used to work for CERC and he's outstanding. And again, Cheryl Sharp and Jody Walker-Smith. So we've really kind of explored, who do we want to work with? What are some different ideas and different thoughts around that? So moving forward, Doug and I are going to have, again, more conversations with CERC. We are going to develop a plan with the administrators, and we need to land the plane on this. We've done our research now, we went to different consultants, and now we just need to land the plane with what we want to do for next year. But what we're thinking about, what we're considering is additional curriculum audits, additional training for administrators. The elementary staff and the teachers have not been formally trained with Courageous Conversations, so we want to make sure that everybody has the same training and has the same language, and more continued training for middle and high school administrators and staff, because the feeling is, okay, now that we've had this training, now what? So how do we now approach it when we're in the classroom, when we're confronted with something, we're sort of afraid to sometime address some things, how do we do that? So it's the practicality and the application piece of how to work that within your classroom, and also how to be more culturally responsive in your teaching approach and in your instruction. So that's where we're moving toward. Any questions?
One of the things that came up with well-being is that the students wanted a safe relationship with some teachers. And so I think one of the steps that we should be looking at is how do we arrange for teacher conversations with students.
Can I, thank you, Bob. I'm sorry, can I add to that?
Yeah.
So restorative practices training is something that is also, started within our district. We have two folks at the middle school, Fitz and, Steve Fitzgerald and Amy Schaefer, who I had actually sent out to get trained as trainers of restorative practices. Some teachers at the high school have been trained, and we have, Toby at Memorial who has been trained. And so, again, we had started this initiative, COVID hit, everybody was home, you can't do a lot of restorative work when you're at home. But now we're back, and so it is also looking at how do we meld the two together, because to your point, developing those relationships, having those open conversations is absolutely key. And having those students feel comfortable in going to an adult and having that relationship with an adult so that they do feel safe. And so that's all part of the restorative work. It's also when something happens and a student is disciplined and they come back, how do we restore and repair those relationships? And whether it's with a staff member, whether it's with two students. And so really addressing those issues, because you can suspend a student, they can come back, but it doesn't necessarily change the behavior or the mindset. And so I think what we want to do is develop a culture where people feel safe, where people feel accepted, and where people just feel like they want to be in school and they belong and respected. And so that's the culture that we want to provide. And through the equity work and through the restorative practices work, I think we can really get there.
We also had 100 kids or 150 kids stand outside the building.
Mm-hmm. I stood there and listened to them.
They need a next step.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a teacher-driven next step. So you need to figure out how to get that group of students into a discussion of what is necessary for them to understand where we're going, what do they think the losses are, or the failures are, and how do they bring about, the students have got to do a lot of changing themselves. We can punish them, we can have discipline, we can do lots of things, but it's they have to change what they're doing to each other. And we have to get that discussion amongst them facilitated, either in smaller or larger groups. But they've said they'll do it. So let's, get their group, get part of their group, let's get a discussion with some of their teachers who are, you know, Deb, I mean, they all know Deb Stone, she'd probably be a good facilitator of how do we get this moving to the next step, how do we
Well,
get what you're
and I think we need to train our counselors too, and we need to train additional staff so that there are multiple people who are on the
Yeah.
table
Oh,
who
yeah.
can do that work. And the administrators too. Many of the administrators haven't been trained in restorative practices. So I think we need to also start there.
I think we ought to ask the kids, what do they wanna do? What is their next step for them to get better?
But that will be taken care of in-house. We have Amy Schaefer and Mr. Fitz.
We do.
Steve Fitzgerald
And
to
I
do
think
that.
we need to,
Yeah,
there's
we
a
don't need to be
consultant
involved
that
in that.
we've worked with through ACES who's outstanding. And also Dwight is also trained in this area. So I think whatever plan or contract we put together, I think that restorative piece has to be a part of that contract to give additional support to Fitz and Amy. And then I think Fitz and Amy can kind of start to take off.
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult. Amy teaches in a class, right? So that becomes a little tricky.
Amy
But
was on the big screen at Prince Tech in front of 90 faculty as well.
they
spreading
are
their
very
wings.
skilled. They are
Yeah,
very
okay.
skilled.
I know who you are.
Mhm. Very
Okay.
skilled.
I guess my point is that it's gotta come up, not just down. And how do you get, we've gotta start of coming up, because they know they have a role in fixing this with the kids. You know, leaders of that group, they need to be part of your discussion, not the end result of it. So they have to know that this is happening. They can't be told that we're doing this. You have to get them engaged in your discussions of how we're gonna do this in the future. I think it goes back to everything that Doug has been talking about on reimagining, is that they need their voice in how do we solve this problem. And they need to get that voice heard, not talked to.
Yeah, and I
Okay?
think, you know, in
So-
listening to the students for, it was an hour and 45 minutes the other day, I stood outside and listened to them. And, you know, what I heard is that they want something done,
Yeah.
right? They
But
want
they'll do
something,
it.
they want something done. And they wanna feel accepted and they wanna feel safe and all of that. And so, you're right, Bob, I think we need to go, you know, speak with the students, talk to them, share our plan with them and see if they, you know, have any suggestions for us as well.
We
Has
will.
Deb been in contact? I'm sure, I know she's been in constant contact with a lot of those kids, but I think she's had a big role too, so I wanna keep that in.
Absolutely.
Well, and like I referenced earlier, she's also the member of our team that's leading the Learning Coach Connection team, like, big picture strategy
Right.
around this. And what we
Yep.
need to make sure is that those things work together and people don't view them as separate things. It's not an either or, it's both. I mean, I think you even mentioned that more a few times about, okay, maybe advisory isn't perfect now at the high school, but it's what we have. So let's leverage that.
Right.
And I think that is the first primary way we kind of,
And it's
that's an
working with
opportunity
Cheryl,
that we
too.
can use. It's already built into the schedule.
Right. I think it's important too to recognize, I mean, I trust you guys implicitly, it's great that you're sharing with us what you're doing, because that's important. You know, it's too bad there aren't more people here, but it's online, so it's people, there's been a lot of, we aren't doing anything. It's important for the kids to have a voice here, but there is that component too, where we've talked about before, as a board, we are gonna live it and we're gonna model it, but at the same time, as a board, working together, our job is to make sure that we set the conditions in place and the support for our staff to make this happen. It's not we're gonna live it, but it's not a board function. The board function is exactly what we're doing, the policies, and people say, well, policies are nice. Well, that's what we do as a governance board, to set the stage, and then we live it as well. But I just have had so many people say to me, well, you know, people don't think you're doing anything. And I'm like, well, here's what it is. It's our people on the ground. Like, we are not supposed to be digging into what everybody's doing on the ground. So I just wanna put that out there, because we're gonna live it and model it and support it. But you guys are gonna make it happen, and I trust that it's happening and you're gonna make it happen.
And also, just to piggyback on what you're saying, if we're going to live it and model it, I think we need to be kept updated so that we know what's going on. And even in some of the processes that you talk about, maybe we don't understand what they are, so we get explained so that we are also getting a training and an education in the same thing, so we're all basically on the same page. Is it my understanding that restorative practices are actually going to be expanded and tried to be developed and moved out more?
That's the plan.
Okay. The other thing is I received some emails, and I think I may have forwarded some to you. There were 2 or 3 suggested programs type out there that exist, and I'm gonna make sure that you get them, because just something else that you can explore to see how it fits in, how it works. You know, it came from some community members who are concerned. The last one was the tools for racial, I have it in my notes here, for racial equity, and there was something with love, I can't remember the name of it. But I'll make sure that you get that, because, you know, any resources that you have are just maybe might work really well.
Sure.
You know?
Thank you.
So, any other comments? Okay.
All right, do you wanna hear from Ken about Zoom?
All right, so, been doing some digging, at policy committee, when I was invited several months ago, you asked to try to find a solution that would give a voice to the public and also be as close to self-operating as possible by the board. Have a couple solutions, one to the tune of $24,000, and that is not going to be something you guys can manage yourself. It would need a dedicated operator, but it is on the lower end scale. Would involve moving within this room where the board currently sits. We're trying to get away, as the vendors have explained it, from the variable heights of the ceilings, because that affects sound coming in. Giving the voice involves replacing almost all of the equipment we've already invested in here, because none of this is tuned to receive audio in, only out. The other quote, which would involve just like a little touch, almost like an iPad, that someone could come and hit start meeting and everything just kind of turns on, would be automated, is closer to the tune of $40,000. Neither of those include the licensing we need to snap into Zoom. Those are averaged at about an extra $1,000. We'd probably want to be earmarking some money toward maintenance and support contracts with these vendors if we went that right, because you know, as Rebecca highlighted on, IT is being asked more and more to delve into the AV world, but it's not something that we are educated or trained on. For a quick comparison, when you go to a concert, that's an audio-visual engineer running everything, not an IT person. Yes, there's some cross, but you know, we can effectively troubleshoot what's going into a computer, but all the wiring and other equipment that starts going in the ceilings, we need to rely on the vendors to properly troubleshoot that. And that other solution would involve, again, moving where we are and adding some monitors, enhancing the public in-person visual access to when we have presentations. But again, that's to pretty hefty prices in the effort to give a voice to the remote public. Something to heavily consider here is that we wouldn't have been able to do this if the General Assembly didn't extend permanently the allowance for hybrid or remote. If that didn't happen, we wouldn't have been able to keep pursuing giving a voice to the remote public.
And
It was extended.
Freedom of Information Commission is still pushing back, but I think it's here to stay.
And hybrid's the challenge here. Remote, we can do very well. We've done it through COVID. In person, we continually make efforts to improve this offering to the home. It's the outside input into this room. That's always a challenge. You don't want to hear the squeaking, the echoing, all of that kind of stuff. So something we could keep looking into, pursuing. Lucy did ask for, can we find something a little lower tech? My thoughts there would be, can we get something as maybe we've kind of all been on like a radio station where they have all the buttons lit up for lines coming. I'm not done vetting that to see if it can snap into our current or future phone system. But that's a potential low-tech solution, because we do know it works okay when we have the landline phone on speakerphone here. It's just we don't have the option to go down the lines. We don't have that line functionality. So lots of different options, but they do come with a variable price tag that's not in the 21-22 budget or been allocated funds for the 22-23.
And if I could add, Ken didn't just look at this room. He basically looked at any room that could work in any of our schools, and also went over to the town hall in Durham to see their setup. And I think my takeaway from what Ken said to me was, and I know that sometimes the comparison was made to what the town is doing. Based on my conversations with Laura and with Ken, I don't think that was really set up to facilitate a large in-person gathering concurrent with a hybrid. It was kind of built during the pandemic, thinking that most people wouldn't want to come in, or that they wouldn't even want people to come in. And so it works very well for smaller committee meetings and things where there's only a handful of people from the public in there. So big picture, I think we need to consider what is our kind of primary mode of conducting a meeting? Is it going to be more virtual now that we have that option? Or is it going to be more in person? And just like we learned with learning, doing them both concurrently is very, very, not just challenging, but it doesn't always produce the best product for our public because there's delays and there's noise. And so again, we're not answering this question tonight, but a number of you brought this up over the last several months, and we're committed to doing whatever the board wishes us to do in this space. I don't think this is the perfect room to do it in. Personally,
if I can,
yeah.
with that, you know, the next area that we thought might currently be a big enough area, but it didn't turn out to be, taking audience and camera distance due to the size of the board, and in all of these scenarios, I eliminated the 4 of us at the table. Just from a camera aspect and distance, was the former lab attached to the library in Strong. However, that would have adequately fit the board on camera, but we would only have like a row for public in that room. So we would almost be saying, hey, we're gonna give you a voice at home, but you have to stay home. And that didn't seem right, so we took that off the table and continued to just focus on this room and taking advantage of the areas, mainly moving it either to that corner or straight back from where we are, because you have more of a single height ceiling, and would afford more audience here as well. But most of the solutions
I have to say that the interesting part that comes from where you say that the town is doing what they're doing upstairs on the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor, that I totally get those Zoom rooms unattainable. But even with the licensing for Zoom, the town meeting the other night for the Board of Ed elections was effectively, we had everyone up on those projectors, technically, right? With an external microphone and a laptop in the back. And it was plugged into the projector. So technically, even though they didn't allow comment from home, or did they even allow, was it?
John,
yeah.
I don't think that we got to that point.
Yeah,
where they
I
were
think
going-
John did, yeah, John did. So they effectively used that screen with a $40 external microphone and a camera that was $100, and they made that auditorium fully like they do for every meeting. So that's the perception, is that.
We didn't see John.
No, you could see, because he didn't have his camera on.
Oh.
It was black, but you could see John Jenkins. If he had his camera on, you could have seen it.
Is
So,
it the thought that people want to be able to like speak though? Like, I'm confused.
yes.
But
I
people
think
are
we
able
have
to do
and
that.
then we have to
In
manage
both-
that is the most difficult
In
piece of
both
that.
towns, we have a huge aging population.
Right.
Huge, and
Excuse me?
No one said anything about you.
Young at heart, young at heart. I know Carl is one of them, has said this before. We have people that really, truly, because of COVID and because of their age, will not come here. And we have a very outspoken, in Durham, and she's a lovely woman, I love her, and she has a hard time getting to places. It's an incredible hardship for her. And I know she's not the only one. So we talk about engagement, and we talk about getting to our voters and really trying to figure out how we can communicate even more effectively. And this is somewhere where I watched what Durham did the other night, and that woman that came back to me and said, see, Durham did it tonight.
Yeah.
And
So
why
were
can't
they
you?
able to speak the other night?
John
So
Jenkins could
somebody
speak.
could call in
Yeah, it was
and
up on the
speak.
projector in the auditorium.
Literally
Okay.
within hours, Kristen went to Staples, got the stuff she needed,
and set it all up.
$100 camera, $40 external microphone, plugged into the laptop in the back of the room, which plugged into the projector in the auditorium. So that, I understand maybe that's not attainable here, and maybe we have to figure out a different way, but when you hear the public saying, why can't you do it? That's what they're seeing, right? Especially from Durham. So they're seeing it happen. So, and I don't have an answer for them as to why we can't do that.
Is
And
it possible to do the same thing in the auditorium, that our meetings just, I mean, I'm sure there's events that happen, but if they were able to do it in the auditorium, then we could do meetings in the auditorium? I don't know.
Awful lot of conflicts, that's just.
I know, besides the things that happen in the auditorium.
That's one of the challenges,
Right.
is not having, like, that,
So
they
we
were
don't
able to
have this-
accomplish it, but it's all
Right.
portable technology.
So we don't
It's
have the
able to be more
sound
breaky.
that the auditorium has in here.
Correct, that's
Yeah.
got
And
built-in
they don't
wire.
have
And I've
this
been in
type of
districts
space.
where auditoriums were used for board meetings, and they were more effective for exactly what you guys are talking about. But they weren't this, and I think this is
I
pretty
know.
important.
Right.
Like, I can't imagine having tonight's budget
That long
discussion with
table,
us
yeah.
sitting up on the
I know.
stage. We could have done it, I suppose, if that was our normal,
I
but.
don't like that linear.
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
it's,
tables either.
and.
But
and
we
so-
may not like it, but what it means
Well-
is maybe 50 voters don't come out to vote because they're not part of our process on a monthly
What I
basis.
would like to say is, I think the main purpose of what you're doing for research is for people who cannot make the meeting to be able to call in or however, and to be heard, to be able to make a statement. I'm not sure whether the visual is that important.
Okay.
I think, this is my mind, I think that what they have to say, I think, is more important.
Right.
So, we also have a new, phone system that's going in. I don't know what capabilities that may or may not have to be able to accommodate people being able to at least be heard, maybe not necessarily seen. And that might be more cost effective, and you're still addressing the big need. I can't be heard because I have no way of contacting because I'm home.
Well, and let
And
me
it
say
has
this
to not
too.
be in conjunction with the live feed, and we do say we offer a live YouTube. It's delayed, and it could be delayed anywhere from a minute to 10 minutes sometimes. So if someone's calling in and they're elderly, they're very likely could miss public comment or be confused or just discouraged and say, hey, I'm done, I don't even care. And then they just go and they vote no to our budget because they're not part of the process. So that's my concern.
My thought on this, and this goes back to that policy committee way back in February, I remember I was in Tennessee or something at the time. If we're gonna do something like this, I think it needs to be married to some of the things we talked about that night, and Ken's even done some research on that. We won't unpack it all tonight, but people signing up in advance, people knowing where they are in the queue, in line. I think what makes this potentially kind of clunky is, we even saw it tonight. Does anybody want to speak? Does anybody want to speak? I still think there's a sign-up sheet where you call ahead of time and you know I'm number 2 in line, and we could do it to where all the in-person people talk first and then all the remote people talk second, or vice versa, but everyone would kind of know that. I think it gets harder when it's just kind of throw it out there the way we've done it. That's not a criticism, it's just to say if we're gonna introduce that element, I think we should consider the advanced sign-up sheet too. And some people like that because if they know they wanna speak and they don't wanna be at the whole meeting, they'll sign up a week ahead of time and get first in line and know that they're first in line, and then they can do that, so, yeah.
I just think whatever steps we can make towards getting there, I think is
Yeah.
helpful.
Even if it's audio.
If you want to just pursue audio only, we can pursue that. One of the things we discussed in that policy meeting was if we're gonna do it, let's do it well off the bat.
Right.
And not just kind of keep piecemealing up, but
And I,
cost gets
and
prohibitive,
I
so if
agree
we
what
wanted.
you said, but then when I
It'd take a
heard
long
we don't
time.
have this in 2022 budget, 23 budget, I don't wanna go through a whole nother school year where we don't have some sort of, even if it's not perfect, even if it's just audio, it's something. Like there were some, I just went to the legislative wrap-up for CABE, and I heard from like a bunch of different boards how they do hybrid remote. There's actually one that does fully, it's called hybrid, but they're fully remote, except for their public has to come and speak in person. And I was like,
It's not fully remote.
And he's like, well, is that legal? So he was asking Kate if it was legal. He's like, it's legal, but it's not very community, like, supportive. And he's like, oh, well, it's worked. I'm like, it's just, I want something to work.
Yeah.
One of the other components to this is, at least Durham, and I know Middlefield's trying to secure something, is they've got a dedicated space. This space has to be, like, these tables are rearranged every time we have a board meeting. We would have to bring in extra equipment, we have to wheel this stuff in. So one of the solutions, adding to cost, obviously we can go, is trying to get as much permanent things in place.
Yeah.
Is there and again, it's not a no, it's a, there's some steps to get there. Is there ever an option for us to book the room at Durham? I'm looking at their calendar right now.
Well, to your point, Amanda,
For all of our
that's,
administrators plus public comment.
yeah, that was my initial thing, like, why don't we just go over there? They've already paid for it, but again.
We could ask them to do an addition.
If we
third
had
floor and
the
pull it
audience
out.
we have currently in the room, we could probably fit there, but we don't wanna do that at the expense of making it not a place where people feel comfortable in the in-person environment.
Yeah, my experience, or impression after going there and looking at the setup is between the TV, the device they have, that's the camera mic combination, and the desktop mic, it's effectively set up to capture a 6-person V. We've got, including the superintendent and Kim, 12 people as part of the main focus of the board.
Can we
Have
convince them to move, can we convince them to move it here, and then they can have their meetings here?
But that was something we looked at, is, hey, can we just, you know, especially knowing Middlefield was going to be putting in a system, although they have lots of, as they explained to me, you know, with the tech shortages, they've signed the, you know, purchase order, but it's not happening anytime soon due to tech delays, which that's no fault of Middlefield. Can we just bounce between the towns to make it equitable and use their equipment since they invested in it? But again, it's the scope of what they're trying to get on camera for the boards were just way larger than anything that they're set up for.
I just don't want us to lose the point that these board meetings are for us to manage the school system.
It's a meeting in public.
And in public, and accepting comments, but they're not public hearings, you know, but we ought to just remember that our function here is to move the board, move the school system, and just focus on what we do as our work is probably the most important thing to remember in our discussion, is we have to get our work done. And, you know, they're just hard not to say it's not really a public hearing, it's just that we hear comments.
Which I agree with, but we had someone come up tonight and say, how are you going to engage the community? You have to do a little bit
And
more.
it is hard when you're a district that has 2 towns that have so much say when we go to vote for something. Like, it's not like that in a lot of towns, like even Doug is saying in different states. So the more
Well, because
engagement
we're a
we can
regional
get.
district, I mean, we're a regional district, so that changes that composition, but, and I hear what you're saying, I wasn't gonna say it, but I have to agree with Bob that we have to also remember that, and sometimes we get diverted from our own purpose, because we so much wanna hear what the public wants to say, and we so care about what they say that we don't get our own work done. So it's really something to also just incorporate as we're thinking about it, to look to all the ways that we can engage people, and then also remember that, you know, it is really important that we do our part and get our stuff done. So I'm with you, Lindsay, I'm with you.
It's 10 after, and I don't think we're gonna solve this tonight. I think we've really gotten into it a lot. And just when you talked about people, with the 10 members, and the rest of you were 15, well, would have been 15 if all our board members were here, but we're, you know, we have a minimum of 15 people, but anyhow, did you have anything else?
No.
Even if he did, he's saying no.
Okay. We're going on to item number 11, approval of minutes.
So moved.
No, wait, I have
correction
a correction on A and on C, and I don't know if anyone has a correction on the B minutes. And how about the minutes under D? Does anyone have a correction there? Because we can lump those together. So, I'm not hearing any, so I'm thinking that.
No, Missy had.
No, but did you have it in either one of those two?
A. I have correction.
Yeah, I have a correction in A as well.
Okay, it might be the same thing.
Can we put the combination ones that we can just do that don't have any corrections?
Well, I wasn't at the special meeting, so I need to abstain to that, so I don't know that you can.
Oh, okay. All right, so then we'll start with, we can start with A then, which is, the, work session minutes of March 23rd, 2022. We have, how do we do that? We have a motion to approve that, and then if there's any.
She has to give her,
Yeah.
she has to give it first, and then we'll make a motion.
Yeah, give the
to
changes
amend it.
first
Give us
and
the
then make
change
it based
first.
on the changes.
Yeah.
So my change is at the, first sentence of the last paragraph of the first page. It says, Mr. Skelps detailed that the lion's share of the town's budget is the Board of Education's budget. And I'm thinking it should have said detailed that the largest share.
Oh, the lion's
No,
share.
it says the
It's
lion's
an idiot.
Oh,
yeah.
I
that's-
never even heard of that. Okay,
Yeah,
that was
it's
my
lion's share, like the
You're
big-
not missing
Okay.
anything, so
Yeah.
you didn't miss anything
Okay,
by not hearing
well,
that before.
disregard, that was my only, unless I missed something else.
The correction that I have, it's more of a typo, not a typo, but it was just a different word was put in there, is on page 4, when you get to the bottom, it's changing the word will to the change with, to with, because it didn't make any sense. And there was, it's the last paragraph in one of the last sentences at the bottom, and the sentence begins with whatever, and it goes, the fear with going to the Connecticut Partnership Plan was all of the people all of the people with high loss ratio, they had will in there, and it didn't quite make sense. So that was, it doesn't change the meaning, it just clarifies it. That was my only change with that.
So moved.
So a motion to approve the work session March 23, 2022 as amended. Moved by Rebecca, second by Lindsay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that's approved. Board of Education regular meeting, April 6th, 2022. Are there any changes that anyone is proposing? If not, we'll have a motion to approve that as submitted.
So moved.
Submitted,
Second.
Lindsay, and second,
Amanda.
I'm losing my mouth.
Amanda.
Amanda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Board of Education, public hearing, April 6th, 2022. Okay, I have a correction. I was trying to figure out where it was. The only correction that I have is the date at the top. The meeting was on April 6th, but the first line says that we held a public hearing on Wednesday, April 8th. So the 8 needs to be changed to a 6. Just a correction there. Any other corrections? Okay, so a motion to approve the April 6th, 2022 public hearing as amended.
So moved.
Rebecca and Lindsay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good. Last one, Board of Education special meeting, April 27th, 2022. Are there any corrections? Amendments? Okay, I don't have any either, so we need a motion to approve the special meeting of April 27th, 2022.
So moved.
Moved by Lindsay, seconded by Rebecca. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Me.
Would be Missy. Okay, thank you. Our next board meeting is May 25th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And the last thing we have is communications. It looks like a lot, but I tried to lump it together. The following 20 emails were received expressing comments or concerns about the presentation by Calvin Terrell. All the emails were shared with the entire board. Because of the number of emails and the fluidity of the issue, I did not respond to any of the emails except to the students. Many of these emails were sent to the superintendent as well, and I believe he sent responses. If anyone's name is left off the list, it is not intentional. Emails were received from Doug Forbush, Cindy Petrick, Bernadette Basso, Students Against Racism, John G. Mateo, Jessica Babbitt, Carrie Sullivan, Flora Fiella, Mike Charon, Nicole Esposito, Bogiasopoulos, Michelle Gohagan, I probably pronounced that wrong, I apologize, Jill Ameo, Brian Oliveri, Francis and Susan McNulty, Becky Finnerty, Rhonda Riggett-Stevens, Laura Samperi, Cindy Felicia Kenyon, Nicole Ercolani, and Anthony Kearns. Some people in this list sent more than one email. I received more than one email from Nick Viola regarding the budget and general comments. Several emails were received from Danya Viola regarding budget comments, weather and meeting concerns, and staff breaks. An email from Joanne Schmidt sharing a program for racial equity called Tool for Racial Equity. That's what I was talking about. I received several emails from Lori Fusco with comments about linemen and programming, strong school incident and high school principal, and lack of communication. Some were referred to the superintendent. Mary Ann O'Brien email about the Zoom platform, which was referred to the IT department. Students Against Racism with an invitation to the walkout. Carrie Sullivan, concerns about high school AstroTurf, and that was referred to Kim. Rhonda Riggett-Stevens, FOIA requests, that was referred to the superintendent. Samantha Winkler, invitation to CARE student ambassador meetings for us. Did all of you receive that? Okay, I should probably make sure you get that. I thought you did. Thank you email from Maya Perry Liss and an email with feedback about the budget. Almost done. Barbara Infeld had concerns about cigar smoking after the graduation. That was referred to the superintendent and high school principal. Cindy Felicia Kenyon regarding protecting our schools. And Mary B. Johnson, feedback about the budget. Did anyone else receive any other communications?
Was that Sam Winkler or was that Joanne Schmidt?
Which one?
Karen Bass.
Samantha Winky. Invitation to CARE student ambassadors.
I think that has to be Joanna.
That's Joanna Schmidt. Oh, did I put the wrong name on here?
Yeah.
How did I do
I
that?
was
That's not even close.
Did that include any of the emails that we got today?
So that's, I'm
No,
sorry.
and we did have emails today.
So it's Joanna Schmidt, so you got that one for the invitation to the CARE student?
I don't think so, but I just knew that that was Joanna.
Thank you. Anyone else receive any other communications? I know we did get a few emails today about the budget tonight. I put a couple of them on here, but there's still a couple out there that I think you've all gotten a copy anyway, so.
Yeah, there's really only a couple. I could just quickly, just so we don't next time have to put those in.
Okay.
Received support of the field house from Karen Buckley, a very lengthy letter. An email from Christine Gerasi, concerns of the budget.
I think that was it for today.
Yep, I think that was it. And Maya Perry Liss on the budget.
Yes. Okay, any other communications?
I just wanted to let everyone know, the first ACES board, governing board meeting is tomorrow. So I'm gonna attend that one. So if we could add that to the agenda for the 25th for a report, committee report.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, last thing, public comment. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak? Speak if you dare. It's so late, I'm only kidding.
Hi, Maureen Funk. I live in Durham. I'll keep this brief. Awesome about the AV, by the way. I think that's great, and I know it's expensive, but I actually think addressing it in the future as part of the reimagining education discussion totally hits the open wall concept. And when that room or location or whatever can be used to broadcast classes around the world and go to some zoo in China, like, I just think it's maybe a little broader than we're thinking that it is, and it's a lot of money, and we'll get there eventually, and maybe there's a short-term fix that's needed, but you all know that. Bravo to Joanna and Corey, and I'm sorry, I always forget your name, Jen, for the work they're doing, you know, and other people too, but they're doing the work that's required now that other people don't always see, and we appreciate that very much. I'd say to the people listening at home or the people that will listen to this or read the transcript, if you care so much about a lot of these things, I highly suggest coming to the well-being meetings, to the board meetings, and to the reimagining education. Like, even if you don't want to commit yourself to being on a committee and whatever, come to the group and see what it has to say. Everybody, I don't care, everybody's busy. Everybody can spare 3 hours?
Yep.
3 hours. Everybody can spare 3 hours if they actually care about what's happening and don't want to just sit behind a computer screen and complain about it. So that's my pitch about that. I've sent several emails that I think board members should be briefed on the incidents that happened, and I think a few people brought that up. I think that's really important. The meeting that happened the night before, 2 days before Calvin Terrell came, whenever that happened, it was very clear that there were certain board members that still were not aware of what actually has happened lately. And I think that's either grossly obtuse or knowingly ignorant. I couldn't decide, but I really find that terrible. So I think a briefing of some kind, maybe it's not in the meeting, maybe it's a report you get once a month. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I think people should be aware of what's happening. And just to be clear, because I don't know if everybody heard what Mariah said before, but we live and work and teach and parent and lead in a town where Black and brown kids are bullied and attacked for the color of their skin, and Nazis feel comfortable to hand out paraphernalia and recruit young men in our towns. So I think the DEI items, which were discussed well and at length, that I enjoyed those conversations, should be earlier in the agenda. And I just think we need to continue having the discussions, because it's not something that maybe isn't happening, which somebody said in that meeting a couple of weeks ago. These were handed out today in Durham and Rockfall, probably Middlefield too, but I only got ones in Durham and Rockfall, sorry. This is not okay. And this is not, oh, they might just be pro-white. They're Nazis.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, Lori Fusco, Durham. So I know you got my letter that was read in earlier, so thank you for that. But we were able to make it, and I do have a few comments on this revision to the budget. Budgets are a determination of values. The proposals here that were approved by the board tonight shows that students are not being valued. You're making direct cuts where kids are affected. Central office needs to have cuts. You're asking the kids to suffer, and you're not making one single cut in the administrative level. Central office is not in line with other districts. You're not surveying, and you're making these determinations without any sort of data to back it up. I'll reiterate my earlier comment via the email. You need to ask the teachers. They can guide the ways to make save the money for the district. Retention at the high school and budget go hand in hand. These budget cuts and staffing reductions are not going to help us keep students in our district at the high school level. These staff positions, technology, world languages, this is programming cuts. This is STEM level programming cuts that the high school students are not going to be getting. Recent high school rankings came out. Needless to say, our high school is not ranked well when in comparison with other area districts. This is not going to help bring that ranking up. I'm very disappointed with these cuts. And I guess that's it. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Lindsay, seconded by
me.
Missy
Melissa,
and
everybody.
adjourning at 10:25.